There we go. The magic of technology, eh?
Exactly. The magic of technology has brought us together. How are you?
I'm very well indeed. Yourself?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm very excited to talk to you. We've had quite, yeah, we have.
I can't say I've heard that before, but go on.
Too modest, too modest. We had quite a few very fun back and forths on Twitter.
Yeah.
Learned a lot from you, which is why
Really?
Yes, which is why I really wanted to have this conversation. So yeah, if you don't mind, maybe introduce yourself quickly to the people who are going to be listening to this.
Yeah. My name's Alan Charlesworth. I think it's important for people to know my background a bit, because I think I'm very different to a lot of the other people that you follow on Twitter, and indeed a lot of the other people which are sort of in that sphere.
Yeah.
In that I've always worked at the sharp end of things, like on the shop floor, if you like. Literally, I spent quite a lot of time in retail and retail management. So I was literally on the shop floor. Yeah. But I left school when I was 15, no qualifications, did lots of different jobs, which when I look back in time, a lot of them were customer facing, as we call it now. That phrase didn't exist back then. For example, I worked on, I grew up on a seaside resort town, if you like. I worked on the fun fair for quite a while. I worked calling numbers on a bingo at a holiday camp. Again, you know, it was that then it was just money in the pocket. But when I look back, it's those things that sort of made me what I am, whatever it is, 50 odd years later. Worked in the civil service for a while, which gave me a good look at administration and the like. But again, I hate the phrase, but customer facing. I wasn't hidden in the back office. I was talking to the people that were coming into the office. I then moved into retail, in retail management, and moved, you know, fairly high up. And that was the organization which I think set most of my thinking about sales and marketing. Learning from the shop floor. Then if I move forward a bit, a couple of my own businesses, I then was at a point in my life where it was, I was sort of mid-30s, and it was like, so Alan, where are you going now? What do you want to do? My wife at the time, who had a very good job, said, well, didn't you want to be a teacher when you left school? And that's what I wanted to do. When I was at school, I wanted to teach English, and we called it PE, physical education. That's what I wanted to do, because my life revolved, and still does to a certain degree, on football. I was half decent at football, so that's what I wanted to do. But family circumstances meant, no, you can't even stay on to sixth form, let alone go to university. So that went out the window. So anyway, in the mid-30s, my wife said, well, you know, you're running a little business, which is bringing some income. I've got a decent job. Why don't you see about being a teacher? So longer story short, I went to university when I was 35. So I was what they call in the UK a mature student.
Okay, to very quickly tie into that, I actually think that is one of the things that's a bit of a shame in our Western culture, which is this notion that you go to high school, elementary, high school, and then straight into college or university. Here in the Netherlands, you have something which is more applied college, and then usually you roll into like middle management or whatever, and then you have university, which a lot of people also use that to go into the to industry, but it's more designed to go into academia. But it's the default, the status quo, which we know from behavioral economics, the power that the status quo has, default bias and stuff. Is that you do that. You go to after high school, immediately you go to a university or a college or whatever. And I actually think it would be good if a bigger portion of society went into, you know, real life, into the workforce essentially, so that when they do enroll into college or university, they have a much better understanding of what they are hoping to get out of it. I've heard the same sentiment echoed by my friends, for example, Professor Bruce Clark, where he has noticed the same thing. You know, the so-called mature students, they are there with a purpose, versus, you know, the younger students, it's more peer pressure, societal pressure. It's what mom and dad wants. and then you run into this weird situation where you're teaching people who don't really want to get taught, who are there for a degree, and it's not like, you know, Seth Godin, who sometimes I disagree with him, but he has this frame, this heuristic of is it going to be on the test, which I think is an excellent way of phrasing it. This attitude of if it's not going to be on the test, I don't want to know it. Versus a mature student, they are there for the knowledge in and of itself. The knowledge is the goal.
But very, very much so. I mean, I retired. I did end up teaching in a university for 25 years, and I've now retired. And again,
in what field? Marketing?
I taught marketing and latterly digital marketing, which is in the UK. The funding for universities, but basically you didn't make money teaching part-time students. So a lot of universities sort of cancelled part-time programs. And I used to love teaching the part-timers because they all worked. So it would be evening classes, they would come in. And what I liked about it is they would question me. So I would say something out of the textbook and they would go, well, hold on, Alan, that's not what we do at our place. And what I could then do and go, okay, what do you do at your place? Where do you work? Oh, you work in a whatever it is, right? Okay, so is that the same for the rest of you? You work in retail, is it? Oh no, very different for us in retail. Then someone else would put their hand up and go, well, actually, that's exactly what we do. And you could get a discussion going. Actually, that was the way I taught. I used to talk to people, and you get them all talking, and they kind of teach themselves and taught me, and I would learn with youngsters. Basically, they sit there and go, well, tell us what we need to pass the exam.
Yeah.
Not all of them, but probably 70, 80% didn't ask questions, didn't want to know any more on the wider issues of the subject, whatever it is you're talking. It was just, do I need to know that to pass the assignment? No.
Yes.
Well, don't bother with me that then. I don't want to know the wider perspective. And I think I think it's an age thing, but also my background. I'm not particularly inquisitive, but I think my generation was far more than the current generation. You know, well, I can look it up on Google. Well, yeah, but and when I used to teach the youngsters, I would say, back in the day when I got my first car, which was a Mini, which always broke down because Minis did. The first time it didn't work, I got someone to come and help me. You didn't go on Google, you know, you might have had a workshop manual or something, and someone told you, well, it could be this, or it's not that, it could be that, no, it's not that, it could be, oh, that's it, right, we fixed it. But the next time it went wrong, you were already halfway to solving the problem because you tried to find out what you were doing the last time it broke down.
That is such
build a kind of knowledge to it. You don't just think that's the answer. And so I'm like that with a lot of things where you just build this background knowledge. So when you've got a problem, you don't start with a blank sheet of paper. You start with a, right, so if we know that, we know that. And I used to try and teach the students that. And when I used to teach them, and I had big problems because I used my module was either voted the best module on the program or the worst module on the program. Basically, good students who wanted to learn thought it was brilliant because I pushed them. I made them think, I made them work, find out. And what I did is I taught them how to find the answer, not the answer, how to, then whatever question you ask them, they know how to find it. But the other group of students who just wanted the answer, they would mark me down. And of course, in modern university life, you live by reviews, and I had too high a failure rate because basically the buggers that didn't do.
Oh, I lost your audio.
That's my fault.
Oh, you're back.
The other students loved it.
I lost your audio.
You okay?
Yeah. Your audio cut out for a second, but you're back now.
Yeah, but if we go back to I mean, I assume I'm on here because it's the digital side of things. I worked at university. I had a part-time job to keep me working, to keep some money while I went to university. When I finished university, I wanted to go into lecturing. It's catch-22. You can't get the job unless you've got the experience. You can't get the experience. And so I was doing a lot of part-time work at colleges, different universities, you know, just to get your foot in the door. And at that time, this is 1995, a couple of the guys that I drank with, you know, friends with, owned a publishing company. They published textbooks, in fact, academic textbooks. And one day, one of them said, Alan, we're starting up a new business. Would you be interested in doing some marketing for us? He knew that I didn't have a full-time job, and in the summer, you don't do any teaching. Would you be interested in doing some marketing? I'll give it a go, worth a try. What is it? And he says, well, we're starting an internet company. And quite literally, I had to go, and the internet is? So I didn't even know it existed. And what they would do, very much ahead of the game, they're now multimillionaires from the companies that they've formed and solved, but they're still into the whole digital arena. But when they explained what the internet was, and they said, well, you can have these things called websites. What we're going to do is we're going to make websites, but we want someone to go around companies and sell them the website, and a domain name. We made more money out of domain names than we did out of the websites. So 1996, I'm on a very steep learning curve of what is it that I'm trying to sell here. But at the same time, I was finding that you'd sort of do the B2B cold calling. Hello, do you want a website? And the website is. Yeah. So I ended up in that 96, 97 time, all around the northeast of England, doing trade shows, commerce company clubs, business clubs, going around all of those, standing on a stage going, this is the internet. It's coming. I can still do it was formed by the military, and to atomic bomb dropped in the middle of America, or cut down all the time. And I went through that, and this is, and you'd got, in those days, vast groups of predominantly men, have to say, because it would be engineering companies. That the northeast of England was very much engineering, sat there going, oh, you're allowed to try. This is never going to happen. And I'm going, no, this isn't a fad. It's not going to go away. If nothing else, you're going to start using email. Email, what's that then? Well, it's where you type a message into your computer. What's that then? Oh, we've got a computer. And it was that whole thing of convincing people that it was going to happen. You've got some people who are a bit more far-sighted, but your run-of-the-mill business person didn't really want to know about it. It's computers.
All right. I think this is a great segue into some of the things that I really want to discuss during our time together. Okay, so let's go all the way back to the basics. What is the definition of marketing?
This is why I wanted to sort of give you a bit of my background, because I worked in retail in a national company. It was we had more shops than any other in the field. We sold car accessories and car parts, and I can't ever remember us using the word marketing. This would be late 70s till the mid 80s. We spectacularly went bust. We were really good at sales, shite at accountancy, basically, but very, very much very American in the way we went about things. That the guy that ran the place owned it. And I can't ever remember us using the word marketing. We did some very little advertising. We did some newspaper advertising once a year, and we once did a TV ad. But that's the only, if you were with the 4 Ps, that's the only promotion we did. So when I went to university and I was told, oh, you're going to study marketing, I'm like there for the first day. Oh, come on, tell me all this marketing malarkey. And I realized that we did do marketing. We just didn't realize there was a discipline which you call marketing, that you could look up in a book. So when I started doing it, was the same with the management side, but we concentrate on the marketing side. I found that all this stuff in the textbooks, I knew what it was, but I didn't know, I'd start the chapter. Oh, today we're doing this subject. Oh, well, actually, I know that. I just didn't know it had a title, that it's called something. And I can remember day one of the first marketing class in level 1 undergraduate study, the marketing lecture, and to be honest, I've copied it for 20 odd years since. It would go, right, what is marketing? In one word. I used to make it easier or harder by saying 6 words, or I used to roll the dice sometimes and go, and he said in one word, and I said selling.
Yeah.
And I'll still give you that argument now. I know there's a wider perspective, but ultimately your marketing is to produce something at the end. Could be sales, it could be registering, it could be, you know, signing up for God or whatever it is. But ultimately, marketing is there to sell. And I do get Professor Ritson's idea of this long and short and this, that, and the other. But building a brand, it's no good having a brand if no bugger buys something from you. So ultimately, it is selling. And I often play devil's advocate. I used to love playing devil's advocates with students, and I could argue against it being selling. But I do firmly believe that marketing is about selling. It's about, again, it might not be taking money off person. It might be getting them to vote for who I want them to vote for. It might be to get them to do whatever, but it's give money to a charity perhaps. But ultimately, it's got to have a result at the end of it. Otherwise, why bother? Why bother? But the other thing I think with marketing goes back to what I just said. Do I call you RJ?
RJ, yeah, RJ is perfect.
Well, what I do with RJ is that I'm a big 4 Ps guy, and I know there's been a lot on the web and this, that, and the other. But basically,
Professor McCarthy, 1960.
Yeah, this is what I took. I didn't know the 4 Ps when I worked in retail. Yeah. And I was fairly high on the management level. You know, I was in the head office, if you like. I was not the kind of wasn't that didn't have a board, but I was up there. And we always said, if we put the right product in the right place at the right price, we'll sell it. I had no idea that was the 4 Ps until I started university and someone went, oh, today we're going to look at the 4 Ps. Whoa, what are they then? Well, it's, hold on. That's what our shop was. We needed to put the shops in the right place, which is a really real bit, you know, the whole retail location. Yes, that's it. Unless you're selling a niche product that someone will look for, that's it. So that was our place bit. Right product. Yes, we had to have the right products on the shelves to sell at the right time of the year. Motoring is very seasonal. You know, one time of the year you sell stuff for people to clean their cars and polish and wash things and work on the car. And in the winter, you sell them something completely different. And obviously price was, you got to have the price right, else they're going to go somewhere else. Or, and this is another thing, you offer a bigger service. Here's the thing. We were called Motorist Discount Centre, and everybody thought we were the cheapest. We hellers like. We had a dozen products that were cheaper than our main competitor. Everything else, we were far more expensive. But we offered a service. We employed, sadly, it was all lads. I worked in recruitment for a while. We desperately tried to get some women to go and work in the shops, but no, it just wasn't the thing at the time. It was cars were men. Get boy. So we employed people who were enthusiastic, outgoing, and people would visit the shop for sort of a laugh, pass the time, talk about cars. That was now those customers don't care that they're paying a bit more for the spark plugs. They're coming there for more than the purchase. Other customers are very price conscious. But that, to me, that becomes the bigger issue of what the, you know, the 4 Ps kind of make it like these are separate things. Well, no, they all kind of meld together. But I really am, I really am a 4 Ps. I was against all this sort of, we're edged into 5 Ps and 6 Ps, and then 6 Ps a wedding and a funeral. I don't know. The add-ons were just part of product. You know,
exactly.
There's one that talks about people. No, that's
exactly
part of the product that you're offering.
Yes, and it's silly.
So go with your first question. What is marketing selling?
Yeah, I agree, and it's also a bit silly because the 4 Ps, it's not a mathematical formula where you plug some stuff in and something pops out. It's just a useful framework to guide your thinking and to make sure that. So I had a very interesting conversation with Dr. Fu the other day. He's also going to be on Talking Business in 2 episodes, 2 weeks from now.
Sorry, I was hoping I would be able to hear his first before I did mine, because there's some of these things I absolutely agree with him, And there's some things I absolutely disagree with him. And
Exactly.
I would have been interested to see where he was on some of these. Sorry, go on. You go on.
In the future, pretty soon, I'm gonna gather a few people, and I wanna start marketing roundtables. So I'm gonna invite a panel of like 3 people, maybe like 4 or 5 total. And we're going to have a discussion on a certain topic, so people can hear a discussion from multiple people, especially people who are in favor of something and people who are against something, but only like knowledgeable people, instead of like, arguing about definitions and whatnot. But yeah, so one of the things we disagreed on a little bit, slightly, is he makes the argument that the 4 Ps are no longer relevant, or at least less relevant in today's day and age. Whereas I made the argument, and I get some of the points that he's making. Essentially, he's like, promotion isn't as important anymore because it's more about educating the consumer, etc. He makes the point that place is less important because if a consumer wants to find you, they with Google and Amazon, etc. They can find you with like a snap of the finger. And he makes a few of these arguments, and I get where he's coming from. It's the devil's advocate, which you were also talking about. However, it's again, it's not a mathematical formula where it's like, okay, the quadratic formula that you use in order to solve a polynomial. It's like, okay, here's a framework that you can use to guide your thinking. So for example, I always stress the order of the 4 Ps. So I don't list them randomly, this is not just a pet peeve, because it's a pet peeve of mine, because it hints to the immaturity of a field. If you ask a doctor, someone is having this particular illness, what are the 5 symptoms? Then 10 doctors will all list them in the same way, because they have a standardized education. So that's like the pet peeve. But there's a solid argument, which is that these 4 Ps matter in different. They have a different level of importance. So, for example, I strongly believe in the whole ideology of customer orientation, which is starting with customer first, which means you start product first. You identify the needs. There's the definition of marketing, which I tend to use and teach to my students, is Tim Ambler's one, which is marketing is everything the company does in order to secure consumer preference and increase profits for the shareholders. But there's a more succinct heuristic, which I also think is useful, which is marketing is about the buying and selling and identification of one satisfying consumer, one satisfying products. So it hints at this idea of it's not just making something in isolation and then using marketing, which means distribution in this context, in order to push it on people, which I sometimes explain with the analogy of you can't make people eat dog food, because people don't want to eat dog food. So it hints at this 4 Ps, starting with product, figure out what people actually want. And that's a key part of product, because a key part of marketing, because it's essentially, now we're getting into market orientation, figuring out what consumers want, quantitative research, qualitative research, etc., versus people who usually start with promotion. So when I think of the 4 Ps, I always think of product and price, the 2 twins, product and price, and place and promotion.
In general, and I think you and I might differ on a couple of these aspects. I've always dealt with small business. So that's not true. I've done some consultancy work on the digital side with global companies, but my the work I've mainly done is with small companies, local companies. And slight tangent, this is where I kind of disagree with a lot of the people that I see writing in various places, is that it might be a small business in Sunderland, hairdresser. It's a hairdresser. You start with product on that, because I will pretty much guarantee you that every hairdresser starts with a hairdresser who wants his or her own shop. So your product is defined by the person who opens the business. But here's the thing, they don't want a global empire of hairdressers. 2 or 3 would be nice in the local town, but their mindset is not to sort of expand and become massive, which is what a lot of marketing is about, and branding and all of that. It's talking about going, no, this person wants to make a living. And the vast majority of small businesses, if you went to them and said, what's your long-term strategy? Well, it's still be here next year.
Exactly. Yes.
Nothing, and all they want is to have a comfortable living for them and their family. Yes. That's it. And that for them is success. And you'll see a lot of businesses, you see it, I'm sure you see it over there in the Netherlands, where we had one in Sunderland recently where it was a cafe. Basically, that's it, a town centre cafe, which was like an institution in Sunderland. And the guy eventually retired. And there's hundreds of thousands of people gathered around for the last day of this thing. But that was it. He retired. He closed it down. He retired and had a comfortable retirement after having a comfortable living. For him, that was success. He didn't even want another one. It's somewhere else. That was it, where he was going to. I've forgotten how I got onto this subject. We started with product. Most engineering works, the founder is an engineer. Yeah, you know, most welding works, the founder is a welder. So it does start with product, but then they know there is a market because they probably worked as a welder for another company. Yeah, and he has seen how much business is out there, and perhaps he then thinks, do you know what, I could do this better. I'll start my own business. So the product is almost a given. I don't know. I'm sure a lot of people out there think, what could we build this week? Yes, but most exactly. Just start with a business. Yes, precisely. I told you wouldn't get a word in edgeways with me, didn't I?
This is good. That is exactly the point that I wanted to make, because sometimes something that I stress, and there might be actual correct nomenclature for this that I'm just not aware of. But one needs to make a distinction between product in terms of its quality and product in terms of the desire that a consumer has, because something can be objectively of a lower quality while still appealing to consumers more. So then we're talking about which of these products is superior, product A or product B, and if a person sees the quality of a product as the key determinant, then they will say product A, versus another person who says, no, it's about what people actually want to buy, and then it's product B. So I think that's important, because then it changes how you think of the P, the first P of the 4P model, product. And then you start to understand, okay, when what you are talking about, which is you have an engineer and they understand the market, then they are talking about, we understand product in the sense that it's a want satisfying product. There's a consumer want, and this is going to do a better job or using Professor Clay Christensen's model at doing the job to be done. The consumer is going to hire this product to do that particular job.
I'm going to butt in there because you keep using the term consumer, which gives the indication you're talking B2C. And fair enough. Vast majority of businesses sell to another business. Yeah. Effectively, unless you're a retailer, do you think you sell to another business? Even the likes of Procter and Gamble, their customers are retailers and wholesalers, not the end consumer. I know you've got.
Do you think that changes the logic? Do you think that changes the logic of the points I just made?
Oh yeah, absolutely. But taking on the point, I think we traded messages on this on
Twitter.
On Twitter, is that very often in B2B, the quality of a given, we're talking about a physical product, because things get more complicated when we get the service out. But if you've got a physical product which you are supplying, that the European manufacturing base for Nissan is about, is about 2 miles that way. Nissan's Nissan's European plant is in Sunderland. If you want to sell a product to Nissan, bit simplistic because there's a much longer buying cycle and this, that, and the other. But if we wanted to sell a button, a switch, or set of switches to Nissan, those switches have to meet a certain standard of manufacture, to certain tolerances and this, that, and the other. So the quality is a given, because if you don't meet that quality, Nissan won't buy it. End of story. So there are some products, and particularly if you're talking safety issues. So if you're making safety valves for gas cylinders, you have got to hit a certain quality. Otherwise, it can't be fitted, sold to another business who fits it to their product, which that might then end up with the end consumer. But, I just try and get this across to the kids when I was teaching them. I used to tell them to stand up and look at their seat. Well, look at your seat. What's it made of? Well, there's some wood and there's some metal and there's some plastic. Do you think one business makes the metal, makes the wood and the plastic? No. The people that the university have bought the chairs from, they assemble the chairs, and they will buy the plastic feet from one company. They will buy the bent metal framework from another company, and they'll buy wood from another. So
now we're getting into
the students,
Peter
you might work for the company that does the metal bending.
Yeah.
So you're not trying to sell them to the university, you're trying to sell it to the company that assembles chairs. And I think a lot of the marketing textbooks and a lot of the theory don't actually consider that B2B chain of events.
That's a great point. I also think now you're starting to get into Peter Drucker's thesis of the business front end and the business back end. Yeah. This distinction of what are you good at versus a perhaps more intuitive or appealing way of thinking to an entrepreneur, which is, oh, we're going to do everything. And I think you're spot on when it's.
I used to like one of Drucker's quotes, which is something you already kind of touched on it. I used to have it at the head. It was at the front of one of my module guides when I used to teach marketing. It was something like, marketing is the business as a whole, the whole business. Everybody that works for the organization is part of its marketing. And I used to start my first session with the marketing class, week one, particularly if it was like introduction to marketing or something like that, an introductory module. I would say, right, let's take the university. The argument that everybody is part of the marketing, not just the people in the head office who handle the advertising and things, everybody. And what I say to them is this: okay, let's just assume, it's always got a bit of a giggle in the first week, let's assume I am the greatest marketing lecturer the world has ever seen. Yeah.
Where's the lie? Where's the lie?
Well, that's exactly. I told you it caused a bit of a, it's a good icebreaker. But then I would say, right then, you're all sitting at these desks now. Would you be taking much notice of me if your feet were sticking to the floor because the carpet hasn't been cleaned, or because you can't rest on the table because it's dirty, and you can't see out of the windows because they're dirty? Would you have the same experience as from the greatest lecturer? No, you wouldn't. So me being the greatest lecturer the world has ever seen, I still depend on, and I picked this particularly because I actually think this is wrong, the cleaners are the lowest paid people in the organization. And yet if the cleaners don't do their job properly, it destroys all of the qualities higher up the chain, if you like. And that, if you've got, we then go into a much wider field of the cleaners, lowest paid, turn up for work one morning and the supervisor says, right, I want you to clean rooms 5, 6, and 7. That's your job for the day. You've got 2 hours, clean those rooms. If you employed cleaners based on their attitude towards what, you could say to them, right, sorry, but you say, I want you to clean rooms 1, 2, 3, and 4. What I want you to do is do the tables and the windows today, and then tomorrow if you picked a cleaner on attitude and just said, you've got the 4 rooms, do what you think is necessary. And a good cleaner would then go, well, actually, I did the tables yesterday, so I can give them a quick wash, but I can really give the windows a good clean today. Yeah. If you gave them sort of decent money and employed people and said, do what you think is best, you would get a far better job than saying to them, today you clean the tables, today you do that. Because what they would do is they would go into the room with the mentality of, how do I make this room as good as I can for the students and the lecturer coming in? And that's very different to cleaning a room.
There are a million different directions in which I want to take this. This is so interesting. Let me first quickly give a shout out to my mentor, Rory Sutherland, who actually explained this concept to me, which is the analogy that he uses is the analogy of, if you go to a restaurant, a Michelin, and you get served Michelin-starred food, which would be the literal interpretation of product in the sense of product A, where it's all about quality. You have something that's high quality, but if your forks and one of the what is it called? A tooth of the fork?
Yeah.
One of them.
Yeah. Prong of a fork.
Prong. Yes, thank you. One of the prongs is English as a second language.
Yeah.
one of the prongs is out of alignment. Then you're going to be bothered by that. Or you know, if like you said, there's an unpleasant smell. There's a little bit of a sewage smell. So now you can that opens it opens the possibility of starting to view product more holistically, where you start to say, no, wait a minute, product is not just the food. Product is the way you're greeted when you enter the store. Product is the facade of the store itself. Product is the location, like you said. A location brings with it a different perception of how it's going to be. The music that is playing, how friendly the people are.
I'm going to interrupt you again, because I'm sure Rory, if you know including Rory, you can turn that round, and if you've got really good waiting staff or really good staff, you don't need the best food.
Yeah, exactly. But I do think it's multiplicative and not additive, in the sense that product needs to be non-zero. And and I don't mean this in which is unless you're doing performance marketing, which is like in the literal mathematical definition, but just as a heuristic, just as an analogy. And what I mean by that is that if you have an incredible product, that's my belief, and maybe you disagree. You can let me know in a second. If you have a terrific product, but all of the stuff around product in the literal definition of quality, but the stuff around it is a little more janky. So the restaurant doesn't smell as nice. The environment is a little bit iffy. I think you can still make it, but the inverse, I don't see that working, where everything is good except for the food, because now you run into a situation where the one thing that matters is a problem. Because I've had these experiences, and you need to be careful with reasoning by analogies a little bit, but where everything was amazing except the food, and I didn't went back. I didn't go back. So
I think that there is a balance though. If you've got like wonderful food, shite food, and okay food, you might go back to the okay food with the excellent service. You wouldn't go back if it's shite, but if edging up, that a customer will look at it, because here we throw in the other one, which you've already talked about, is price.
Yes.
Where you look at the restaurant, where if I'm going into the 5-star restaurant with the this, that, and the other, and it's costing me, I'll just use the figure £100, I expect it to be absolutely perfect.
Yes.
But if I'm only paying £50, then your expectation lowers, and that's where you might get the balance of, well, we know the food would have been better, but you do get, have you ever been to France? You do get the situation where sometimes, my experience, if you go to these high-class food places, the service is almost deliberately not as good. Almost that attitude of, well, you're here for the food, aren't you? Kind of thing, you know. But then if the food is so exquisite, you think, well, I'm going to put up with this. I'm going to put up with having to wait to get some more wine or whatever, because the food is so good. But it is that whole balance, and I think you've picked a almost perfect example of a restaurant, because there is so much going to it. And restaurants are different. You know, if you go in the what I call, and I don't mean this derogatory, it's just my description, plastic restaurants, which are the chain ones. You know, can we mention names on here? But there are certain chain restaurants where if you go into Nando's, you know exactly what you're going to get. You're going to get fairly cheerful staff, but they're running to a script because they're not
for the people who haven't been to London, or I don't know exactly where Nando's are.
Nando's is Portuguese. I think
But, all right. I know of Nando's mainly from people from the UK. But what bracket is it for the international listeners? This is like McDonald's.
It's McDonald's plus.
Exactly. One tier higher.
It is. They are a restaurant rather than a takeaway. They normally look to bring in groups of people. So it's where a group of staff from work might go after work or have a leaving party. Yeah. I don't think it's somewhere where you take your first date to Nando's. Yeah, it's not that kind of, it's more about
friends and family.
Yeah, it's more about, what's the word? It's more about the event than it is the food. The food is okay, perfectly acceptable, but the staff are where they give you, they say happy birthday to you when they're cheerful and things. But Nando's is always trying to get you out. because they want someone else at your table. So that whereas you go into a 5-star restaurant, you're expected to be there for the evening. You know, that table would be, you're paying for the table for the evening when you pay the £100 a head kind of thing. Whereas Nando's is no, and I don't mean this as any disrespect to Nando's. I've had some really good nights at Nando's with, you know, with the drinks coming in and it's that kind of place. Yeah.
All right.
I don't, by plastic, I do not mean as a negative. It's just that, you know, well, and here's the thing. Every Nando's is the same. So if you're in a new town, and let's say let's say me and you and 6 others met up and we said, oh, let's go for a drink after this. Where should we go? Nando's. You know what you're going to get at Nando's, and that's a positive. You know, that is a positive that we don't. Well, that restaurant looks nice, or that one looks nice. Well, there's Nando's. What do we want? We want somewhere for something that's reasonable to eat. We're not going to leave it. It's a reasonable price, and we're going to be able to sit and have a laugh and a chat while we're there. Yeah,
exactly.
Nicely. Thank you very much.
All right. Let me quickly close up the one of the open threads, the loose threads, which we had in the beginning of the conversation with respect to B2B and B2C. I also think very quickly, because I want to take this all the way back to the beginning of marketing fundamentals. I also think in mathematics, it's very important that you're whenever you start talking about something, that you inform the reader or the other person which domain you are talking about, because it impacts what is true and what is false. So to take a very simple example, is 7 divisible by 2? It depends on the domain, because if you're talking about natural numbers, those are whole numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 3.5 isn't in that set of natural numbers. So if you're talking about natural numbers or integers, which also includes the negatives, then the answer is no. But if you're talking about rational numbers or real numbers, then it's yes, because it's in 3.5 is in that set. And I think the same thing is true in marketing when it comes to our, like you said, are we talking about small businesses or like huge brands? So for example, I had an interesting conversation with Steph Hammerlink. His episode is going to launch, going to ship this Sunday. And he's you know, a branding professional, so he places a very strong emphasis on distinctive assets. And if you hear smart people like that talking about that, and you know, Professor Byron Sharp from EBI, Ehrenberg Voss Institute, you know, it's all about distinctive assets and market penetration. But if you're a small business, then you know, how important are distinctive assets really? Not that much, because you're most of your traffic and most of your customers are probably going to come through some form of network, essentially. Well, so that changes the dynamic.
I totally agree with that, and I'll come back at you and say that I think it's what do you mean by branding? And when you read a marketing book, or when you read what the guys that you've spoken about who've written books, branding is McDonald's, it's Nike, it's Adidas, it's the big brands. Bring it down to the local business. I've just told you about the cafe that closed after 50 years in Sunderland, and now I can't remember its name, so that wasn't a good example of the brand. But the brand was simply the sign over the door and the man that ran it. He was the brand.
It becomes more about reputation.
Yes, yeah, good word, reputation rather than brand. And you talk to small businesses. I know of a small business, relatively small business, although probably medium business, which sells software to engineering companies. That they don't have a brand name as such, not a brand. If you said to them, what's your brand name? Well, we ain't got a brand name. You've got a name, that's the name of the company, but what they've built is a very good reputation with the after sales service. They sell software to engineering companies. Engineering companies quite often have people who can't work computers properly to set it up for their manufacturing things. So they've got an after sales service where they say, just ring us up. And they've got trained people answer the phones, and they go, right, what are you doing? Right, what's your problem? Right, where are you? Right, now here, much like you just did with me. Right, clear the screen by pressing this. Now try pressing that. What side? Now do this. Now have you got the screen? And then the person on the other end goes, yeah, got it. Thank you very much. That's what they build their reputation on. And like you've just mentioned, networking. what happens is these engineering companies get together for trade
Word of
shows.
mouth.
Oh, we're having a real play on with our computer. Oh, it's absolutely shite. We've got no end of orders. Oh, actually, last year I signed up with, I won't name them. We signed up with the company F, Magic. The software's okay, but the after sales is perfect. What's their phone number? That's how marketing tends to work.
I don't know if you're familiar with Marty Neumeier or Neumeier.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, he's someone who's well known in the branding world, essentially.
Yeah.
He started an agency and he did a lot of work with the design of the Apple boxes and Microsoft boxes in Silicon Valley. Yeah, back when software was still shipped in boxes, essentially. And he has this definition or heuristic where he says something along the lines of branding is not what you say something is, it's about what they say it is. So yeah, and I think that becomes more true when you're talking about like smaller, medium-sized companies. I think because there's an issue where, like you said, which is very important, that you need to specify the domain, because a lot of the information on marketing and branding, etc., is designed for Fortune 3 companies almost.
Yes.
You know, and that's a problem, because you can't. It's just like scientific research. You always need to be careful with external validity, which means how well how well can we generalize your results from this specific study to, say, the general population.
Yeah.
And that is something. But I actually wanted to take it back to marketing fundamentals. Let me ask you one question real quick.
Yeah.
I don't want to spend too much time on this because I want to go all the way back to marketing fundamentals.
Yeah.
But really quickly, since we touched on this topic, where do you stand on differentiation with respect to small companies? Do you think it becomes more important when you're smaller, being different, or do you have an attitude where it's like there's so much demand from the market that it doesn't matter that much to be differentiated, just do a good job, etc.?
I think. Do you know what? I'm gonna come back and say almost the way that the organization employs the 4 Ps differentiates itself. So let's go with restaurant again. Yeah, you could right. Here's you've set us on a good example with restaurants. If you've got a restaurant in the town centre, and a restaurant in the suburbs. Okay, so you know it's a town centre where you've got lots of traffic from people passing. There might be offices and things nearby, or in the suburbs where basically you've got to get in your car and go to. So Nando's are all in a city centre where there's lots of people. People can go, where are we going to meet? We'll meet at Nando's. Yeah, that's great. My train stops there. My bus stops there. My tram stops there. We'll meet you in Nando's. That almost differentiates itself from the one in the suburbs, which cannot cater with lots of traffic. So it's more likely to be a specialized one. It might be a Greek restaurant or a Lebanese restaurant. It's where people go, it's your birthday next week. Where should we go? Right, we'll go, and shall we invite your brother? And so it's like 6 people say, we'll meet.
What a good point. What a good point.
It's almost self-differentiating. Yeah. You go to the one out of town for the special occasion, you know it's going to be more expensive. I just threw price in. You would expect Nando's to be lower priced, because it's got plastic seats and you know all of that kind of thing that comes to it. And again, so it almost self-differentiating. Now, if you are the owner of Nando's, and you want to differentiate yourself from, 10 other similar chains, well, what you do is you make it Nando's, which is, I think it's Portuguese owned, but it's like a Mexican restaurant kind of thing. So that's the difference. It's Mexican food, as opposed to the other very similar kind of similar food, similar service, similar price. It might be Indian food, or it might have some kind of something that does differentiate it, and I can't think of anything off the top of my head that you say, if you go there you will get this, if you go to that place you'll get something else, but ultimately you're going for the night out. So you get a good night out there, and what happens then is that if you get 20 people together, let's say for works, if you've ever had to organize a works Christmas do, it's a nightmare. Where do you want to go for the Christmas do? Well, which thing is, no, I'm not going there. I want to go to Nando's. Oh, well, I've been to Nando's and I didn't like it. I want to go there. Yeah, but that's expensive. It's a Christmas do, you know, all of those things. So they're almost self-differentiate. Now, if you want to take that higher and higher and higher, and how does Apple differentiate its phones against somebody else's? I've got an iPhone, you know, and basically, I'm actually going through the classes that I've done over the last 10 years. The iPhone technically is inferior to many other phones. So why do we all buy iPhones? Because it is, a part of it is the box. Have you got an iPhone?
Yes, sir, I do.
I bet you've still got the box.
I believe so. I'm not 100% sure. Maybe.
They're so good, you don't throw them away. It's like, wow.
It's exactly.
Wow. And it doesn't pull apart. It goes, and it's like, I can't throw this away. I can't put this in the recycling bin. Mine's in the. I'm funny enough. I'm moving house soon. I'm downsizing, and I'm having to go through, you know, throwing things away, and I still can't bring it. This. I've got an iPad, and it's still like, I can't put that in the recycling bin. It's almost a product in its own right, kind of thing.
Oh, that's a good point. That's a good point. And I actually, I actually saw a small video of a person who was responsible for the design, and they were testing hundreds and hundreds of different iterations in order to make sure that the time that it took in order to, when you lift up the lid for the bottom half to come out, that it was a specific amount of seconds.
You can't go like that. You've got to go like that. Yes.
And they didn't want it to happen too soon, but also not too long. So a crazy attention to detail. But I think for me, Apple actually is not that irrational, because I think that's why I'm such a big fan of Professor Clay Christensen's model of jobs to be done, because it takes into account the totality of all of the features and the consumer experience or customer experience in general, because it also works for B2B, in my opinion, which is that, yes, there are phones that have a better camera, or perhaps a better screen, or perhaps a higher refresh rate, so they have differentiation in a feature. But the way everything works together, for me, is in that regard, I think Apple still leads. Because, for example, I'm on a MacBook right now, and if my wife calls, I can pick up with my phone or with my MacBook where I'm working. If I copy something on my iPhone, I can paste it on my MacBook, and if I copy something on my MacBook, I can paste it on my iPhone. So there are a lot of these things, and I'm wearing my AirPods now, which connect to my Mac, but also to my phone, depending on what I'm watching. And it's I think from a jobs to be done perspective, even though there are products that are superior on individual features, I think when it comes to how the software and the hardware work together.
You realize you just went back to the restaurant, didn't you? I said with the restaurant, which has fairly good food and fairly good service.
Exactly.
You've just said about the iPhone that it's not the best at anything. Individual app, but all together.
That's why I think, like I said, I think if you think of things as multiplicative, it starts to make more sense, because then you can say, okay, we can dial up features a little bit, and we can dial up customer service to this quantity, and then you get like a total output, which if that's more valuable than the amount of money that a consumer has in their hands, then a change will occur, essentially a trade, where it's like, okay, I value your money more than my product, and I value your product more than my money, and now we switch, and there's an increase of joy at both parties.
The other thing with that is that, and this is something I've often struggled to get to small business to appreciate, is that Apple will lose some sales on its iPhone, because if the person buying the iPhone wants it for its camera, for example, they will buy the phone which has the best camera on it. Everything else on it might not be that much good, but they're buying for that. So as Apple, you've got to sort of go, okay, we're going to lose those sales because we don't have the best camera. But there aren't that many customers who want the best of a particular element of the phone. They want the overall thing. And of course, kudos to Apple. You know, I've left my phone in the other room, so if it rang, it wouldn't come over on this. I used to do this with the students, and I can't do it now. But if you pick up an iPhone to use and you put it, right, pick up an iPhone to use and put it to your ear like that, you can see the Apple logo. And that's brilliant, because when you look at it normally with a product, you would put it in the middle. And if you put it in the middle and someone held it to their ear, their hand would cover the Apple logo. They just put it near the top. And certainly, and certainly it does still exist, and it certainly exists in the early days of Apple. There was the check me out Apple. Yeah. Not just Apple phone. So there is that element to it that I always try to be honest with myself and look at it. Was that part of the reason I first bought an Apple phone?
Yep. Yes. Now we're starting.
Almost certainly. Yes, that was part of it. That's why not the total thing, because I soon went to you. I'm on a PC now, but I do have an iPad, and all of my calendar. It is the common term commonly used in B2B, switching cost. If I went to a different make of phone, it might not sync with everything and this, that, and the other. Yes. And that's another one in a B2B. I used to stand in front of classes and things and go, what's switching cost? And they've no idea. Well, guess what? If you're selling computer systems to businesses, switching cost is one of the biggest issues you've got to get over. Yeah. But if they're taking one computer
you are tied in
out and put another one in, it's like, the basic switching cost is I can't make anything for a week. Exactly. And that's a lot of money for, you know, it is that element cost to it. Whereas the Apple thing is more of a conveniency. You know, I'm sure I could buy another phone and switch it over, but
but it also depends on how many Apple products you have, because there's this you get locked into this ecosystem where everything works together, and the software and the hardware, and you know, what are you going to do? Get a Windows laptop if you have an iPhone, an iPad, and AirPods?
Yeah,
you know that it. So that's a very smart choice on Apple's part, and I believe
full marks. Full marks.
Yeah, exactly. And I believe that wasn't accidental. So sometimes stuff happens accidental, and then people will rationalize it and pretend that was on purpose. But I think it was actually in something they did purposefully. But all right, let's get back to let's get back to marketing fundamentals. So we have a definition of marketing.
That was about an hour ago. That was
exactly. Okay, so we have our definition of marketing. At least one that's directionally close enough, which is selling. Marketing is about selling. Okay, what are the next steps? What are some of the pillars that we need to consider? So we talked about the 4 Ps, but that's more tactical. So how should we break it down? We have marketing, which is selling, and now what's next?
Not sure I understand your question. What do you
mean? We have a definition of marketing, which is sits at the top. But what are the pillars that we should put under this label marketing next? So for example,
I'd still go with the 4 Ps. It's the reason I think you almost said it before, and I used to say it to the students, and I'd say it to business owners and managers as well, is if you've got to do some marketing, you can either start with a blank sheet of paper and go, or if you say, right, you've got to do some marketing, right, here's 4 things to consider. Consider your promotion, consider your price, and so it's not that, and they are guides. They're not the be all and end all. Some of them.
Let me interrupt you for 1 second. What I was actually trying to lead you towards is to give you an example. For example, Mark Ritzen's framework, which he talks about, is you have marketing at the top, but you split it up into strategy. You split you start with a diagnosis of a particular problem. You turn it, and the strategy is still part of marketing. And then you have your you have your diagnosis, you have your strategy, and then you have your tactics, which is how you're going to execute the strategy. And then under the tactics, you can hang the 4 Ps from Professor McCarthy.
See, I understand what strategy is. Although when I started at university, I had no idea, although that's not true. It is idea. And I think it's relevant I always used to bring this in when I was teaching the subject, is strategy comes from the Greek, and it's about military. It's how to win wars, basically. That's what the Greek word that strategy comes from. And so you look at it, and same with logistics. The term logistics in Greek is movement of armies. So you look back, and I sometimes with the students, to try and get them to understand, I would say, right, the strategy is to win the war.
Yeah.
The tactics is how you go about it, which are different things. And I do agree with Mark. I actually, he's one of my favorite people, if for no other reason than he swears a lot. Although that was, it annoyed me because we used to have very mixed classes at Sunderland University, and you couldn't swear, which meant I could never use some of Ritson's videos and things. Because if I'd have showed them one of his videos, without a shadow of a doubt, at least one of the students, from different backgrounds, different countries, they would complain. I like the idea, but anyway, I really do like what he says. I disagree with very little of what he says, but he talks at a strategic level. It's that high up level. When you come down to smaller businesses, and again, another slight tangent for you. In the UK, it's small to medium enterprises. And you can be a small enterprise with a £4 million turnover, or you can be a small business with up to 250 staff. Hold on, if you employ 250 staff, you ain't a small business. You're quite a big business, in my opinion. But they all might be in one factory or one location. They're not global and this, that, and the other. But when you talk to small to micro businesses,
mom and pop shops, for example.
Yes, or just that half dozen employees kind of thing. The restaurant. A restaurant could employ 25 people. Many of them will be part-time and different times and this, that, and the other.
But if you take margins into account, then profits are
exactly. But they don't have a strategy. They don't know what the world is. They might not even have a plan. The plan still exists.
Have a strategy.
No strategy at all. I have a thing with strategy. I talk about things being strategic or strategy. I use the word. If you say to people strategy, I think people think, oh, that's like a document. It's a written guide that says this is our strategy. If you talk about something being strategic, you're talking about something being more long term. It's that understanding of it. That's the way I try and play it. I've never met a small business with a strategy. They might have a plan, but they might not even have a bit. Sorry, I'm doing them a disservice. They do have a strategy, but it's in here. Okay. I want to do this. By this time next year, we will have done this. But it's not this written document that you can refer to and bring your staff in and go, look at this. This is our strategy. It's just where we want to be. This time, in 2 years' time, I want 2 restaurants. Yeah, that's the strategy. But they must make a certain amount of money. We must have a overall income of this, working at a certain profit margin. But I think that's business.
Is that good enough?
In the books you call it business strategy, but smaller business owners, they just call it business. Well, that's business. That's what I do.
Yeah. Is that good enough for small businesses or do you think there's room, because there's how it is and what's optimal, and do you think that's optimal or do you think that's fine?
I'll go the other way and say it's better.
Wow, interesting. Go ahead.
If you haven't got a strategy, do you understand what I'm saying? That in their head, they've got a plan. They kind of know where they want to be and what they want to do. Mm-hmm. If you've got it, let's say you get someone in who writes a strategy for you, suddenly that becomes the gameplay. That's what we're doing. And when I used to teach this kind of subject, the example I used to use restaurants, actually, I would say, right, McDonald's has a strategy. Yep. So McDonald's, the restaurant, there's the corporate strategy, if you like, which were business strategy, marketing strategy, recruitment strategy, all the little strategies that go together. Whereas if you've got Alan's Burger Joint, if something happens in the world, or in Sunderland, or wherever Alan's Burger Joint is, I don't know, anything from a shortage of bread rolls. That actually hit McDonald's, didn't it? 4 or 5 years ago, there was a shortage of bread rolls from the supplier they dealt with.
Yeah, and sometimes the potatoes.
Contractually tied into those bread bun suppliers. Alan's burger joint goes, shite, no burgers. Who else does burgers? Oh, I know, them, on the phone. You got 6 dozen buns, please? Yeah. Find a baker's. So without that strategy, you're kind of more flexible to where you want to go and react to changes and that kind of thing. Whereas in the corporate world, your strategy said, "Well, go, we need a meeting. We need a meeting to sit around and look at the strategy to see if it needs to be changed to adopt to this, that, and the other." That's why I'm saying I don't think smaller businesses, they don't have a strategy as in the word, the written down, that their business is their strategy and their tactics kind of meld together.
Great point.
To be honest, I often struggle. Where does strategy stop and operations and tactics start? Where do you pick up? When our strategy is to be, and I hate the strategies. I think I agree with Professor Ritson on this one. I hate strategies which are the sort of, we aim to be the greatest restaurant the world has ever seen, and we will provide our customers with the.
Everyone says that. Yeah, exactly. It's interchangeable. It doesn't mean anything because you don't even mean it, because your own behavior demonstrates that that it's nonsense.
Yeah,
exactly.
And I mean, I totally agree that if we look at someone like Nike, they've gone down I think it's wrong, but we'll see. They've gone down a strategy of direct to customer. That they're chopping wholesalers out, they're chopping out that's going to shops. I've got to assume they know more than I do about this. They're Nike, for heaven's sake. But really, can you really sell as many shoes from your head office by sticking them in boxes and individually sticking them in boxes rather than putting them in big shops, which are like warehouses, and customers can walk around and go, I'll have that pair of shoes. Yeah, I don't know, but they've obviously got a strategy of, we want to switch from using wholesalers and retailers to direct to consumer. That's their strategy. Right, now how do we do it? On another slight tangent, I don't think it's I have a thing about direct to consumer. Direct to consumer in marketing, old-fashioned marketing, is from the manufacturer to the end user. Nike don't manufacture. They have stuff manufactured for them, but they don't manufacture. So they are buying things from a manufacturer and then they're retailing them. That's direct to consumer, is manufacturer to end user. The example in the textbook is the farmer grows the tomatoes, sells the tomatoes to the person that eats them. Even the big D2C new phrase of who was the people that did the shavers and things?
Dollar Shave Club.
Yeah, there's 2 or 3 of them. They were all called D2C. No, they weren't. They didn't manufacture the razors. They didn't manufacture the soap. They bought it and sold it on a website, and it was called. Probably cost VC would pay more money for D2C. That's new. We'll give them lashings of money. That's new and trendy. Well, retail. They are simply buying the goods and retailing them.
Yeah, now we're getting back to Drucker's front end, back end, because the idea is that if every business focuses on the stuff that they are the best at, the system becomes better, because you can take advantage of stuff like unit economics, economies of scale. What I mean. Because if you have to manufacture, 2,000 razors, that's going to be super expensive versus someone who does like millions and millions, and you just order your 2,000 from them. And it's also more effective because they can focus on just that. You're going to need phones if you're going to be running a business, and you're going to be needing a laptop, and you're going to be needing chairs and lights and electricity. Do you all want to do that by yourself? At some point, the whole thing becomes ridiculous. But anyways, all right.
Ask me another.
Yes, exactly. So yeah, there are 2 more things that I wanna cover, but let me ask you a hard question, and just take it how you will. So you taught digital marketing for quite some time. could you give could you pretend that we just finished the course essentially, and you're gonna recap some of the most important points to our already educated students in order to reinforce some of the ideas and be like, okay, remember, these are the important points that I want you to remember.
From digital marketing?
From digital marketing, yeah.
Right, well, I could say, and this isn't a plug, I'm not on here to plug, I write books on digital marketing. I'm currently working on the 4th edition of one book, and I could argue that the 10 subjects I've chosen as chapters are the important things. But what I don't think you can argue that search engine optimization is more important than the website's development, that is more important than social media, that is more important than others, because it depends. I know a lot of people hate that phrase, but it depends on the organization. For the organization, search engine optimization is the be all and end all. For another organization, probably in B2B, email, direct marketing email is by far and away the most important thing. The biggest thing I say to my students, and I've actually been criticized, we have to do feedback from the students, you know, it's the way of things. One of the criticisms I used to get is, Alan, you spend a lot of time telling us how useless digital marketing was, and or how it wasn't useful, because my whole thing is, and I used to start the module, and the book starts with, this is a book on marketing. It happens to focus on marketing using the internet, which is known as digital marketing, but it's marketing. And with marketing, that I used to like the analogy.
It's a tool. It's a tool. It's a tool in your toolbox.
And that's it. And for some, so the way that my books run, but I've done a few, but the main book I'm on the 4th edition of, I used to take the approach of, right, here's the theory of, let's go with email marketing, direct marketing email. Here's the theory. Here's the things it's really good for. Here's the things it doesn't work for. Here's the disadvantages of it. Here's the advantages of it. Yeah. So we'd study that, and then I'd say, right. And I used to make up case study organizations, and I'd say, right, case study organization 1, it's a small museum. Case study number 2, it's an online e-commerce women's dress shop. So number 3 is an engineering company that does that. Right now, is direct marketing emails useful to any of these? So then you take the theory and you look at the situation and you say, no, where's the museum going to get a list? Because one of the disadvantages of direct marketing email is getting a list of people to send the emails to. Where's the museum going to get the thing? What benefits are they? No, but then the other two. What you get is, over the range of digital marketing tools or tactics,
depends on the context.
It depends on, for some, and you know, I have a big thing about social media. 2 books on social media. But it's right for some companies. It's not right for others. And what's happening on the Twitter and things is the social media and the influencers. They're giving the message that it's right for everything.
That was just
it's perfect for some.
Exactly.
Waste of time for others.
Yeah, I was just about to make that point, because this is one of the problems that I have with people like Gary Vaynerchuk, Seth Godin, Simon Sinek. They all come across as very friendly and kind people, but I don't like this whole descriptive idea where it's like, okay, you can for example, the problem that I have with Seth Godin is he's so vague that what he says is non-falsifiable. It applies because it's too vague, and then you run into the situation where it can never be falsified, because it's almost like a horoscope, you know. Some people enjoy horoscopes, and it's always true. But with Gary Vee, it's like, LinkedIn is good for everyone, and it's like, exactly like you said. So if you take the locksmith, for example, how much is a locksmith going to benefit from SEO? Who uses a locksmith? The moment when you realize that your keys, it's late at night, you went to work, you come home, it's 8 o'clock, it's raining, you're searching for your keys, and you realize, oh crap, I lost my keys. Now you go on Google, and now you're trying to find a locksmith. How many people are going to be subscribed to an email newsletter from a locksmith because they find it interesting?
Exactly.
So exactly. So it depends on the context, and that is annoying, because Imagine if you have an issue in your house and you need, nowadays we have like specialties, you have the plumber, etc. But like back in the days, obviously you know this much better than I do, but the thing of like the handyman, one person who could do all of it, was more common than it is nowadays. But imagine if such a person came into your house and they loved hammers, and now they're trying to fix everything with a hammer. You know, the tool is a function of the problem that you're trying to solve.
You give it a good. I really, I'm not plugging the book here, but when I decided,
no, wait. I want you to plug the book. You know, I'm gonna list it in the description, because there's so much misinformation. Because the people who don't know a lot about marketing are very loud and vocal. So you know, be very vocal.
When I decide on the 10 subject areas for the 10 chapters, and I do appreciate, I slight tangent again. I don't believe in digital marketing as a separate entity. It's part of marketing. However,
I agree.
At universities, 90%, 100% nearly of universities teach on modular schemes. So you have to divide the various subjects into parts. So if you're teaching, you know, if you're teaching human resources, you've got a module on recruitment, you've got a module on training. It's the way it breaks up. And so it's logical to have a module on digital marketing. Although, again, I'm a marketer that writes about digital marketing, but I'm a marketer first. So when I looked at the 10 subjects that I've just rattled off, which one comes first? And I decided search engine optimization comes first, because you've just sort of, you more or less told me I'm right, is the locksmith. He or she needs to be high on Google, because search engine is where the customers will find that person. So they really need to concentrate on being at the top of the search results, whether that's by paying for it or just doing your SEO properly to get there, because that is essential. The others, not so essential. To teach social media, know that your website needs to be half decent, because they're going to click from the Google listing to that. But by half decent, it could just be, here's our phone number 24 hours a day. Oh, thank you. I'm ringing you up because I'm locked out.
Google listings,
Google
business listings.
Well, exactly. That's exactly what you need to look at. And that's what I've told businesses over the year. However, if you're not a business that people look for you on the search engine, Nike, who searches for Nike? You've no need to concentrate on whatever it is, social media or influencers or whatever it is, an influencer to sell a locksmith. You know, so what my decision is that if it's important that you're on SEO, your digital marketing goes one way, and if it's not so important, it goes another way. So that's where I start the book. I have actually got a little picture of a signpost that says, if the customers find you on search engines, this is important, and you do these things. But if it's not so important, you go on a different route and you do different things. And you might look at brand building for a locksmith. Yeah. Although again, I would bring us back to our total thing. If the locksmith turns up, and he turns up on time, or he or she turns up
reputation.
On time, turns up on time, is friendly, says, oh, why don't you go and sit in your car? I can sort this out. If they clear the mess up after them, you know, and they leave the thing, and they end up, you know, after 30 minutes, they give you 2 keys and they say, there's your new keys to your door. And now you need to give me £100. Next, and
they don't jack up, and they don't jack up the price. They don't
reasonable. Exactly. Got to be, you know, it is again. It's and this is another thing I have with small businesses. If you offer a good service, you don't need to be the cheapest. You can also, I've said this before, selling things. Well, why your website's more expensive than them? Because ours are better. Mm-hmm. Why is that Fiat more cheaper than that Mercedes? Because the Mercedes better. That's it. Yeah. People don't like to be ripped off, but if our locksmith gives a good service, that is his or her marketing, because the people then go, oh, give us your card, and the next time they have a problem with anything to do with locks, guess who they're ringing first? The person that came along. And when they're talking to their friends and whatever, got locked out the other night, and the pouring rain is mine. this bloke came to see, really good locksmith. Oh, what was his name? So the next time someone's locked out or needs locks repairing, oh, Dave and Janice, they used a locksmith. Text them, ring them, find out who. The marketing is the service that you give.
This is how the car mechanic industry works. If you have a problem with your car, because what's the biggest thing when it comes to your car breaking down and you want it to get fixed? You don't want to get screwed. And people are very scared that someone is going to screw them, precisely because a lot of these businesses are so short-sighted. So they try and like rip you off, and you know, if you don't come back, it doesn't matter, because you know Rory Sutherland, he calls this I believe he calls this like tourist business or something along those lines, where it's like, you know, you're a restaurant, a seafood restaurant, and you do your business with tourists. There's an incentive to screw them over as much as possible, because you're never going to see them anymore anyways, and you're constantly getting fresh blood and new supply, versus a restaurant which is in the city center of a small village, where reputation, word travels quickly. So yeah, I think when it comes to car mechanics, this is something that becomes very important, because now people are willing to pay a little bit extra if that prevents the downside of all of the sudden they're lying to you that your oil needs to be changed and your air filters. And there's this worry: am I being ripped off? So yeah.
Yeah. Ask me another question.
All right.
Oh, did I answer that one?
No, yeah, I think we've covered the ground there.
But it is that I'm going to reiterate this, and I know the phrase has taken some stick on the Twitter, with the Twitter people that we follow and things, is, oh yeah, it depends. Well, yeah, it does depend. You know, when I went to university, the guy that taught us, you know, year one, semester one, introduction to marketing, he talked about the marketing mix. And it's gone out of fashion at the moment, but he described it as the marketing mix. And he said, in the kitchen, you have lots of different products and ingredients. And if you want to make a cake, you use that ingredient and some eggs and whatever. But if you want to make a casserole, you use some meat and some whatever. So the marketing mix is the same. You've got the marketing mix is all of the tactics which are in the 4 Ps, and the promotion includes advertising and all of that. What is it that you want to do for your business? Well, I wanted to do this. Right then, the marketing mix is, well, we need a bit of PR, and we'll have a bit of this, and we'll have a bit of that. And that will work for that business and that owner, because you might have 2 restaurants. You might have 2 restaurants side by side in the same street, but the marketing mix is different for the 2 restaurants, because one restaurant is owner run and the other restaurant is part of a global conglomerate. So the marketing mix for those 2 are completely different. Yet for the customers outside, it's the same thing. So
I think this is.
Oh, sorry. The last depends is, can you afford them? Because I used to say this with students, right? If you've got an unlimited budget, you do everything. But small businesses, no. And a lot of my students went to work for small businesses. So they didn't go into strategic marketing positions. They would go in to be the marketing person at a relatively small business. And so the owner says to them, well, your marketing budget is X, whatever, £10,000 a year. So you can't do everything. So what you've got to look at is, you say, right, I've got £20,000. Do I spend it all on one TV advert? Do I spend it or do I, you know, they've got to look at it and go, well, I know the best result would be from doing lots of different things, but I'm limited. So should I spend it on a website? Should I give it to some influencer? No, spend it on something which is, and this is where I got the feedback from the marketing students who said, you're teaching us non-digital. For the small business with the £20,000, you might actually be better putting the advert in a local newspaper or local radio than employing an influencer or something, or anything digital. You know, it could be that you don't actually need a website or anything, no social media. your better choice is putting an advert on local radio. If you've got a local radio, which is just that, then it's that mix. What is best for it? Yes, you might get more customers if you paid £100,000 to an influencer, but you haven't got £100,000 to give it to them. You've got to stay within your constraints.
Yeah, and also that is debatable. You know, you hope that the influencer is going to work, but you know, remains to be seen. Sometimes engagement
you really don't want to get me started on influencers.
Yeah,
that's another 2-hour session.
My big brother, one of my close friends, Noah Kagan, he runs a company called AppSumo, or Sumo Group. They have multiple businesses, but it's Groupon, but for software. Okay. So they have the Groupon business model, but for software deals. Yeah. And he said the exact same thing. You know, he is. We are very close, so I absolutely love the guy, but I genuinely believe that when it comes to the process of like starting companies, I think probably he's one of the, if not the most knowledgeable person on the entire planet, because he has done that process so many times, like dozens of times. And I'm just talking about like the getting started phase, obviously not scaling, because we live 80 years and like 60 years maybe are like your business professional life. So, you know, if you're talking about IPO, you can do 2, 3 max, maybe, you know, if you're lucky. But like just the process of making something people want and making that trade. Here's a product, here's money, and that doesn't get a lot of attention. Which is why there's a lot of misinformation. But he has done that quite a lot. And as a function of that, you also need to respect how the marketing mix works, whether or not you're coming at this from an academic perspective or just, you know, because you want to make money. And he has noticed that same thing, and he taught me that. For AppSumo, the Groupon for software, they had huge success with Facebook ads and driving those Facebook ads to a landing page where they capture emails and then using those emails to sell deals to people. But in other businesses, that did nothing. And they tried SEO, for example, for their deals, but the SEO didn't really work because SEO is more of it tends to take more of an educational form where it's like I'm selling skincare products and I'm educating you on which ingredients, yada, yada, yada. We build trust in how you versus what AppSumo does, which is more about impulse buys essentially. And then so this idea of Facebook ads can work brilliantly for one company, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it'll work brilliantly for you. And it's the same thing with SEO and all of that stuff, or cold marketing, cold outreach.
And with your brother, although Facebook advertising worked really well for his Groupon type thing for software, another company might set up its Groupon type thing for software. That doesn't necessarily mean that Facebook ads will work for that business. It worked for your brother's, but an identical product. There's a reasonable bet that it would, but it's not necessarily an absolute. And that's where I think there's been a lot of talk on some of the people that we follow on Twitter of academic theory behind marketing. And I use this in one of my books where I'm not a big fan of academic research into digital marketing, but that's another
interesting.
Story. But what happens is you've got and I found this in universities where you used to get the problem of why is this faculty producing more academic papers than the business school? And I think it's because in the business, and I'm talking all business schools, is if you're in the physics department and you come up with this new theory that if you add, these 3 things together, it does something. And if you add those 3 things together in Sunderland or in the Netherlands or in Chicago, the same thing happens. In marketing, you can't do that and say, if you do this, this, and this will happen, because it won't happen the same in Chicago as it happens in Sunderland. And that makes it very difficult to come up with these theories, which are, for want of a better word, absolute. If you do this, same with IT. If you connect this software, and press this button, this will happen. oh, let's write a paper on that. We found out, that's me typing, by the way. We found, we know it works, and we can sell that. But in marketing, it's like, well, we found that when we did this and we did this, this happened. But this was in Sunderland with a specific business with specific customer grouping, and yeah, it's an indication. It's an indication. If it works in Sunderland, it might work in Newcastle, which is 15 miles away, and it might work in Middlesbrough, which is 30 miles away. Would it work in London? No, because London's like a different country to Sunderland.
Yes, exactly. But by the way, good point, because you see the companies who are struggling with having a successful business and then trying to open in China, and the dynamics. No one succeeds. There are like two people who pull that off. Like US and Europe tend to work better, but like US China or Europe China. Jesus Christ, which is why most of the companies have a clone. Google has Baidu, Netflix has their own version, whatever. So you get like these clones in China, because it's so different, the culture there. Tim Ambler has work on doing business in China, by the way. But anyways, this is why I like Rory Sutherland so much, by the way, because he really respects the difference between academic research and being pragmatic and realizing this problem with replication. But here's where I want to close this conversation with you, because naturally this opens the door to pseudoscience, because now we get into a situation where you can say, okay, everything is astrology, you can't test it anyways. So that's now we're going too far in the opposite direction, and as Sam Harris would say, you're playing tennis without the net. So how do you prevent getting into this situation where you say, okay, well, anything goes?
I honestly don't know. You've moved into a sphere in which I have never moved and never really been interested in moving, that whole theoretical application and things. I mean, you are, I believe you're a mathematician.
Yeah, that's by training.
I mean, I am really quite good at arithmetic. I am absolutely shite at maths. I can't add two fractions together. Never have been able to. I don't know whether it's different.
No one can.
We're
making it up.
But sorry, the reminder is, when I was at school, it was fractions, not decimal. But I've never been able to understand it. And I've tried a couple of goes of kind of getting into it when we started getting involved in search engine optimization and things. I tried to look at the mathematical side. It's just beyond me, and I'm too old to be bothered to actually take on something new in that thing. So that whole theoretical thing. I'll tell you another thing which annoys me, and I think it's related to this, that I find it in marketing, is non-marketers publishing what I think are marketing papers, and they're flawed. Because the people, let me go, I've got an example, right? Published article by three guys in America, published in a respectable marketing journal from the academic sense. It's not the top grade, but second grade. And they looked at, this was about 3 years ago, they looked at the impact of reviews on sales online, right? So if a product has a review section as opposed to not a review section, they did that on purpose, on cameras. It was the sale of cameras. If the camera on the website has a review section, does it sell more? Are people more likely to buy it than if there wasn't? Now, I knew from 1997, when I was involved in a e-commerce website selling stuff online, I knew in 1997, because I did A/B testing to websites, to web pages, that if you tried to sell the product with reviews, you sold more. And if you didn't, and if I knew that in 1997, Amazon knew it in 1995. Yeah. But these three guys did this research. To me, it's like, if it had been one of my students doing a dissertation, I said, no, you can't do that as a dissertation. We already know the answer. But no, they did they did and it came out at the end. They did the end, what they call the hypothesis with n equals this, and they ran it through all the maths, and it came out that, well, lo and behold, the answer is yes. But there was a number against it that said, yes, you're more likely to do it. So I didn't like the research because I thought it was researching something which technology had proven. You know, you don't need a theory to look at your sales coming off of a website on it. But the three people were techies. Technicians. They had got computer science degrees. None of them had any qualification, because you can look up the bios. That's the problem. You can look online. Well, where have you worked? What have you done? None of them had done any research or anything to do with biobehavior. Now, in my opinion, that's what their research was on. The subject was biobehavior. How does technology impact on the? So no background in marketing. All three of them, they're all computer scientists. I don't think they were qualified to do that research because they didn't know marketing, they didn't know biobehavior enough to apply what we know about biobehavior into that research. But then, guess what? You get academics, and I used to have trouble with my students doing dissertations. They'd write a dissertation that say, this works because Smith and Jones 2019 proved that it did. And you look up that paper from 2019 and you think, no, that's deeply flawed. But how do you tell the student who's referenced it in their dissertation that they're wrong when all they're doing is saying that we're going by what this research says is right? And it's the research which is flawed. And often the research, another one of my bugbears with academic research, marketing in general, there are exceptions, but digital marketing in particular, they reference back to previous work, which is also flawed. And I think there's some talk on some of the more technical aspects of Twitter at the moment with the medicine and things, where you've got to go back, and a theory is only held if you can reprove it over again. Yeah, if it doesn't work well, you've got people like, for example, you've got someone writing in academic paper. I read one a couple of weeks ago. It referred back, it was on social media generally, and it referred back to some research which was published in about 2005 on social media. Well, I would argue it was wrong then, but it's not right. You know, it was wrong then, but even if it was right in 2005, if we're talking social media, unless the reference says this has changed very much since Smith and Jones 2005, but to rely on it to prove a point of social media marketing in 2020 is nonsense. You know, you should at least look at it. Sorry, that's just a bugbear of mine. I get it off.
No, I think that's an excellent point. In fact, Dr. Fu makes the exact same point. You know, that is his core critique. You know, he says there's a lot of research being done by academics who research marketing, but aren't marketers. And then you combine that with the fact that he does a lot of work with you know, the smaller businesses, and then, you know, you're sitting on a powder keg, which needs to be lit, and it'll explode. But what is your how do you feel about the research being done by EBI, Ehrenberg Boss Institute, Professor Byron Sharp, Professor Koen Pauwels? Where do you stand when it comes to that stuff? Do you still have the same?
Above my level, I don't even read it.
Okay.
Sorry,
because it deals with big brands and whatnot.
Yeah, it is. It's outside of my sphere of interest. That it's stuff that I just don't have an interest in it because I don't connect to it. Does that make sense? I don't connect with what's going on. And there's some stuff which filters down and like will appear in books or whatever. But the bigger picture is not something that's really interested me because I've never worked in that, and I've never had anything to do with it at that level of things. That's why I say I started off our conversation a while ago.
Small businesses.
I'm down. In military terms, I'm in the trenches, not back in the staff officers doing the planning. You know, I might be an officer in the trenches, but I'm not. You know, I'm not the man with the gun. But I'm still, and I'm more in tune with that. And to be honest, even over my years since I've been teaching, which is 25 years, is I've never seen I don't think I've seen any of that big stuff filtered down to the small business level. I still think it's national, if not global.
Yeah, that's what Dr.
they're
Cruz
looking
says.
at, and even things like buyer behavior, which I believe you have an interest in. It is if you're looking at buyer behavior. Well, actually, you pointed on it. The buyer behavior in Sunderland is different to the buyer behavior in Newcastle, which is different about the buyer behavior in the UK
Amsterdam.
is different to the Netherlands. And so when you're trying to cover all of that and coming out with blanket statements, I look at it and go, nah, the locksmith, nah. No, nothing to do with it. Nothing to, and even the local is the local supermarket. We've got a couple of supermarkets in Sunderland which are part of if you like, a miniature chain. I think there's 6 of them in the region.
Yeah.
Do they copy what Asda and Sainsbury's? No, they can't copy them because they ain't got the money to do it. They thrive on their service. They're not the cheapest, but that's and local is another thing. I don't know if it's the same where you live. Sunderland, I'm not from Sunderland. I've lived here 40 odd years, but I'm not from Sunderland, still an outsider to some things. Sunderland people are very parochial. So if they know that business is owned by somebody in Sunderland, they'll buy from there. And that if it's owned by someone from Newcastle, they may no need, don't open in Sunderland if you're from Newcastle. Same with the other. There's sort of rivalry based on goes back to the Civil War between Sunderland and Newcastle. But it is that people in Sunderland, if you can buy it from a Sunderland business, they'll buy it. Locksmith. If your locksmith example, they get the phone out, they go on Google locksmith, and one comes up, locksmith Newcastle, locksmith Sunderland, they will ring the one in Sunderland.
Yeah,
I don't just mean because it might be more convenient. It's just, no, it's a Sunderland business. I will trade with Sunderland. Feed that into some of your buyer behavior things. Where have you chosen it on price? No. Have you chosen it on convenience? No. Have you chosen it on this? No. Have you chosen it on brand? No. Why did you choose it? Because it's from Sunderland. And I'm sure in other parts of the world, in Leeds, for example, it will be the same with Leeds and Bradford. And it's in, you know what I mean? So where's your theory on that? When it comes down to a local decision.
I feel like your view on marketing is very much that of a chef. Like you're the Gordon Ramsay of marketing. because there aren't really like laws where it's like you have the food scientist who is researching what's going on the molecular level. It's like you're throwing stuff together and then you're tasting it and you're like, oh, this is good, or oh, this doesn't work. with the exception of food being replicable, where I can make the same dish and it comes out the same in marketing now.
I used to use Gordon Ramsay as an example. You know have you seen the TV show Gordon Ramsay, where he goes in America to failing restaurants?
I have, yeah. You have the UK version, the Europe, and the US version.
So here's the thing. I would say, I've not seen them all, but in 100% of the ones that I've seen, the one key element that's wrong with the failing restaurant, the attitude of the owner. It all goes, whether you watch them all, it's like the owner is either too much of, I'm in charge, I make every decision, or perhaps they've been running the restaurant for 20 years and their enthusiasm's gone down a bit, or whatever it is. The problem with the restaurant always goes back to the owner, and that applies a lot to small business. Small businesses reflect the owner, and if the owner is positive, is outgoing, is friendly, or whatever it takes within that business, or the owner is an expert engineer, that feeds into the business itself. And if the owner changes, the whole business changes. And the other thing is, you can't replicate that owner. The owner of the restaurant is the brand of the restaurant, is what it is. And if let's go with if she opens another restaurant, she is not there.
Yeah.
So that whole persona thing can't move to another restaurant. Yes, she could flip between the two, perhaps successfully, but when she opens number 3 and number 4 and number 5 and number 120 and number 121, which is in the Netherlands, you've lost that whole persona, the thing that drove it from the and what you then end up with is what I said before, the plastic restaurant. Because what she has to do is write down, if you like, a strategy of, you will, in our restaurants, manager, here's what you do. You will do this, you will do that, you will do that. And it becomes robotic of her 125th restaurant, unless she can employ managers or manageresses who can reproduce her personality, her drive, her enthusiasm, which is impossible. Then that's where, and that's why some people, and I don't mean this to be negative or whatever, some people want to, I don't know, what's your exit policy? Want to build a business to sell it to Microsoft for several billion in 10 years' time. Some people want to have restaurants in every town in England with their name on. Some people just want one restaurant with their name on. So long as it gives, they can buy a nice house and feed their children, send their children to university and drive a Mercedes. Why would I want to take on the hassle of opening restaurant number 2?
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. Yeah, I agree.
Why should
I sometimes have discussions with people on that on Twitter, because I have the exact same view. In fact, we have 2 programs, YRC and YRC Deep. And YRC is a 12-week boot camp for indie founders. So indie founders is a term that I made up. It's essentially people who are doing business via the internet. There's already a term. It's called indie hackers, which are which are always engineers, pretty much always, and they're trying to start a startup by themselves via a non-VC route. So it's starting a startup, but instead of doing it with venture, you're doing it bootstrapped. So those people are typically called the indie hackers. And I just took that and like expanded it a little bit, because a lot of people in YRC are not hackers. They aren't engineers. There are a lot of like non-technical, but I believe that there's a lot of opportunity with, for example, selling information or expertise. You know. But in YRC, it's this exact same concept. You know, one of the things that we focus on heavily during the 12 weeks is something which I call a minimum viable company. Decrease your burn as much as possible using minimalism, and then make sure that the amount of money that you can pay yourself via your salary and the profit. Because I believe your business should also start kicking profit back to you as early as possible, even if it's just like €7 or $7, you know, but just start building that habit. And that equation needs to be such that your total income exceeds your burn. And then once that is, when you have taken care of that, you are free to do whatever you want. You can grow it, you can scale it, you can indulge in your hobbies, but it takes this stress off of you, you know. And if you look at like the vast majority of people, they aren't even entrepreneurs, they're employees. And when you're an employee, that's exactly how it works. You get more money than you spend, hopefully, and then you do whatever you want in the rest of your time. So I think that's perfectly valid. Let me just ask you one more thing, and I think that's a nice place to wrap it up. I already asked this question. I already asked it, but I want to see if we can find some closure here, because one of the issues that I have when it comes to the disjointedness, if that's even a word, between marketing academia and the marketing practitioners is this opening, this fissure, this crack, this opening for pseudoscience, where it's like, okay, anything goes. So I already asked this, but how can we prevent that? Because if I look at startup education, marketing education, consumer psychology education, just all of these different things, I frequently see stuff where I think it's wrong, and then I can argue why I believe that it's wrong. But the problem that the question that I have is, how do you do that if you are less bullish on like academic research? How can you then say, okay, with from a Bayesian reasoning perspective, with a high degree of certainty, we can say the probability of what you're claiming that this is the right approach is probably low. How do you do that? How do you make sense of that information? Because otherwise, like, your neighbor could say, well, Alan, you know, you don't know, so therefore I'm just as much of an expert as you are, which of course isn't true.
Again, I don't think I'm even someone who can offer a full opinion on that. I think when we're looking at research, we need to go back into the whole. I never did academic research in the UK. We're different to just about the rest of the world. where I worked basically as a teacher, but I was called a lecturer. And then I became a senior lecturer. In a lot of countries in Europe and certainly in America, to become a full-time lecturer, you become tenured and you're a professor. And in the UK, you are appointed as a professor. So you don't get many. So most UK universities will have lecturers, senior lecturers and principal lecturers, and a few professors who are specialists appointed by the university, say, we think you're a specialist in this, this particular field, and that's it. So when you're doing, I never did research because I didn't want to do it. The reason I went into lecturing is, as I said before, I wanted to be a teacher. And that's what I did. I didn't do any research. At the beginning, I was under quite a lot of pressure because I was one of the first to get involved in this whole, we didn't call it digital then, this whole internet business, internet marketing, e-marketing, e-commerce, whatever you want to call it. And I was under quite a lot of pressure to do research in it. And I said, no, that's not me. I can't write academic. Yeah, I can't write academic language. I hate reading it. I can't do it. So I never got involved in the whole thing. But when I was sort of looking at it, to me, I called it a game. You wrote a paper and you then had it peer reviewed by basically 6 of your chums who would eventually, you would review their work. So you got a fairly close set. And in the early days of the internet, back into the 90s, 2000, I know there was actually some good academic research in the early 90s and mid 90s. But, you know, I knew more about, if we take domain names, I was, if you like, I'm going to say I was possibly one of the world's experts on domain names in sort of 97, 98. It was because I was there. I wasn't anything special. I happened to be in the right place at the right time with a company that was selling domain names. And I became an expert in advising companies what domain name they should choose. Not for new businesses, that's easy. It's for existing companies. If you're Nike, it's easy, nike.com. What if you are Sunderland Refrigeration Engineers? What do you do with that? So I got quite famous in that. And I would read some academic research on domain names, and I could read it and I could just go, no, that's wrong. Not my opinion, that's wrong. That's just wrong. Like calling a domain name a URL. No, they're different. A domain name can be a URL, but a URL isn't necessarily a domain name. And that would be in an academic paper that's got through this peer review thing. So in other words, the reviewers didn't know what it was either. I used to highlight this in one of my books. Some proper academic research using the whole null hypothesis thing, and it's decided that the best domain name was 13 characters long. The reason was the most successful
correlation causation.
The most successful companies in the world, if you average them out, their name length is 13. Yep.
Yeah.
And so they just looked at it and said, oh, the most successful in the companies have a domain name that's the average 13. That's because their names are 13. And you look at that and you think, really? Is that how to choose? Well, Sunderland Refrigeration Engineers, how do we make that 13 characters? Let's get a Scrabble out and try and do it. So on that side, I always think that academia is a bit of a game, and there is no outside person, the me, if you like, to look at it and go, no, that's shite. And
I wish we had Professor Bruce Clark here. I think because he agrees with a lot of this stuff, but I think he can also offer. Go ahead.
Yeah, you get that. As I say, you look at it, and I think if they brought in outsiders, I was asked by one, because I write books. A lot of the publishers also publish academic journals, so they kept asking me to do peer reviews. Well, I did a couple, and I was never asked again. Basically, I went through the paper and said, this is rubbish, this isn't proved, this isn't that. Well, that's not what they wanted to hear from the reviewers. They wanted to hear wonderful stuff. Well done, crack on with that.
What is the route to becoming a lecturer in the UK? Is it undergrad, grad, PhD, and then you can
no, it depends. Do you appreciate in the UK we've got 2 different types of university: old university and new university? No.
Okay.
Old universities are hold on. I used to do a lot of recruitment for the university, there are about 160 universities in the UK. 60 of them are old, 100 are new. Yeah, that's about the balance. Old universities, Oxford, Cambridge, Durham, Bath, Newcastle, old as in have been around for centuries. Yeah. To work in one of those, you would definitely need a PhD to even get in. Yeah. But that reflects the way that they teach, the way that they present themselves. It is PhD stuff. Yeah. The new universities were all made universities in 1994, including Sunderland. We were colleges or polytechnics. And the government decided, looks better for the Great Britain if we've got more universities. And so the new universities work on a more practical level. It's more about teaching students to work than the new universities is teaching students so that they can go on to do postgraduate PhDs and probably work in the same universities. Yeah, you mentioned it before about that sort of samey thing along. New universities, yes, of which Sunderland is very much an example. When I taught students at undergraduate and postgraduate, I was teaching them what they needed to know to do a good job of work for a company. That's the thing we're at. So how did I get onto this? You're asking about the route into. I left Sunderland 2 years ago, but I still have a contact, a colleague that I'm very close with. I did my first ever Twitter chat with him. First ever Twitter chat was with him yesterday because I had to ring him up and say, Gavin, you use Twitter. Just make sure I can work this thing, will you? But during our Twitter chat, I was asking him, how's it going? And he was saying they've just had 2 new people appointed as lecturers who have got postgraduate degrees. So you can get into lectureships with simply postgraduate. I got into lecturing with an undergraduate degree. I did take a postgraduate degree when I started work, but I got in on the basis of my managerial expertise and expertise. Yeah. I think that is sad. I can't name names, but since I've got my this isn't really me, RJ, live with it. My books are sold all over the world. So I am kind of famous within a field. I've had 4 old universities offer me professorships. 2 of them, all 4 of them while I was still at work, 2 of them have come back to me and said, oh, now you're retired, Alan, did you want to be part-time kind of thing? All they were looking for was my name. And they admitted it. They admitted it. They said, look, because I said, I want to be a professor. I don't do research. And they said, we don't want to do your research. We want to use your name in our promotion, in our marketing effectively, because and kudos to them, full marks to them. Although I don't know that they'd succeeded. They recognized that some of the companies that they were working with in research and in consultancy weren't all blue chip KPMG type things. They were working with some smaller companies who basically turn around and says, we don't want to work with our PhDs. It's above us, too clever for us, too academic. We want someone to consult with who can tell us what to actually do with regard to digital marketing. I turn them down for a whole host of reasons, but that's not my scene. And I think that the newer universities do employ people. If you go into a new university, you will find a lot of older lecturers who have actually worked. I always say lecturing isn't work. Lecturing for me wasn't work, as opposed to when I used to work for a living, when you had to work. They're bringing in people from industry, and my students told me that, Alan, we loved your teaching. This is how I taught, RJ. I didn't do lectures. I never did lectures. I'd sit in front of the class and chat to a group of 25 students like we've been taught now. And I would try and make sure we covered what we were supposed to be covering. But they used to like my stories because I can give examples. If you're talking about domain names, I can give you an example. Did you know, for example, this is my teaching. Do you know Asda in the UK, one of the big 4 supermarkets? ASDA, Asda, right? It's one of the big 4 Asda, ASDA. It stands for Associated Dairies, right? Been around for hundreds of years. I know, I'll let you guess how I know. I know that they bought Asda.com off the Arizona State Dental Association. Now, if you're teaching someone about domain names and you can throw in a story, it makes it real students rather than just giving a theory or quoting no disrespect to people that some of you, who's that? If I can say to them, yeah, here's an example. Here's an example of a website. And I know of an example of a good or bad website because I've not worked on it. I've worked in a consultancy or something. And I think the new universities recognize that if we bring people in from industry on all fields, whether it's science, engineering or whatever, if you've got somebody who has actually done it, is usually a better teacher than someone who only knows the theory of how to do it.
Yesterday with my wife, we were watching a movie about an American football coach, and I think in some sense, when it comes to marketing, it's a little bit like that, in the sense that you're calling different coaches and you're like, hey, I'm thinking about doing this play, and do you know anyone who has experience with that? And they're like, dude, we tried that like 20 years ago, it was a disaster, and so it's there's an interesting balance. I don't know if you know Bill Bernbach, an advertising, famous advertising guy. Okay, Ogilvy probably because it's UK. But yeah, he talked about advertising, which is a subset of marketing, as a mixture of science and art. And I think you run into,
I get that.
I think you run into issues when you go too far in either direction. So when you start saying it's all creative, then you open the door to pseudoscience and astrology. And when you say it's all science, you run into the same issues that Skinner had in psychology in the 1900s, where it was like, everything that happens in the mind is non-scientific because I don't know what's going on in your mind. So it's all about a stimuli and a response. And that was so extreme that obviously eventually the field of psychology said, okay, this is getting ridiculous, and they moved on. And now in modern psychology, we can actually talk about the mind and stuff like that. So I think you want a nice balance, a healthy balance, just like with American football coach, how they are talking with other coaches who also have expertise, and then you use your best judgment.
And your question was about academia and papers and research. And I think I just said that in the answer. If you listened only to practitioners, you wouldn't always get it right. And if you listened only to academics, it wouldn't be right. Bring the two together, and to a much, much, much lesser degree, when I talk to you about having worked in sales, marketing, retail, customer contact, all of those things, and then going into a university in 1995, 94, 1990, Alan, I finished in 94. I was 35. I went in and as I say, a much lower level, I was looking at these theories, like you mentioned one of the theories today on Twitter. Was it you, Porter's 5 Forces?
No, it wasn't me.
Sorry, it was in one of our chains. I beg your pardon. But it was someone talking about Porter's 5 Forces. And I was introduced to that in the business, Business 101 covers like Porter's 5 Forces. And I'm like, oh, fantastic, this is a theory, this is someone. And I looked at it and I thought, yeah, when we was opening a shop or when we was doing something, when I worked in retail, we actually did those, but we didn't know it was a theory. We didn't have it written down. We just checked on who's the competition, who's in, what's the 5 things. And I found it very interesting as this mature student that everything I'd learned in practice actually had a theory, but then I started looking at it a bit closer, and I think every theory is based on practice. Porter's 5 Forces, he didn't sit at a desk and go, ha ha, I think he'd been out in industry and gone, oh, do you know what? Ooh, yeah. And then the 4 Ps, the 4 Ps have existed since Ugg killed his first dinosaur and thought, shite, I've got more dinosaur, but I've got no fire product. Stood at the edge of his cave and shouted, I've got some dinosaur to sell. 3 chickens and a fire is price. Is shouting at the cave is promotion. Which one?
Promotion.
Distribution is, I'll bring it down to you. That's the 4 Ps. But it was only 1960 something when McCarthy said,
McCarthy,
I'll write this down as a theory. So it's not, the practice has existed forever. But until you, and my criticism of some academics is they will argue that practice didn't exist until someone wrote it down as a theory. No, Yes, and we're talking about business now. I do appreciate that in the sciences, you can have that thing where someone proves that if you add these three things together, something happens. Have we done that before? No, that was an experiment and it's worked. I understand that, but in business, no, it's been around forever.
Yeah, I do feel that the scientific process is important, because it's in marketing specifically, because it's not about acquiring this bag of facts. You know, it's a systematic process, or it's designed to be, at least, you know, if everything is working correctly, which you pointed out earlier, that's not always the case, to separate fact from fiction. Yeah. And it is a way in which you can achieve that, and I think that's what I like about it, because it closes the door a little bit when it comes to pseudoscience, because now you can start asking questions. You know, how important is Net Promoter Score, NPS? Can we correlate that to revenue? You know, a change in NPS, etc. And now we have something that we can test, that we can replicate, that we can that we can have a better opinion about, versus because otherwise sometimes it becomes too much he said, she said, and then you get into arguments where it's based on authority, where it's like, okay, this person is older, you know, let's just go with him. And you start moving further away from truth. But as you said, you know, the problem with marketing is that
if you've got more followers on Twitter.
Yeah,
it
exactly.
Must be right, because they've got 1 million followers on Twitter, so it must be right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And there are a lot of mouth breathers on Twitter, and the stuff that goes viral and tends to do well.
Yeah.
Huh?
I love that, mouth breathers. That's a great.
Yeah.
Great
I started saying that accidentally, and now everyone is using that word. But it's funny, because I heard it from Stranger Things, that I later realized that I heard it in a show, and that's why I started using it, but I didn't make that connection. But the problem is that there are these perverse incentives which incentivize people to say exactly the wrong stuff, because the stuff that does well almost never correlates with the stuff that's actually true. You know, it can happen, but it's rarely the case. So you see the stuff that goes viral tends to be the stuff that's wrong.
And what bothers me about that is that there are people who are new to marketing, whatever, or starting off their own business or entrepreneur. They see that and they think it's right, and they spend their money on it, and it's a total waste. And their business doesn't get off the ground because they've spent money basically doing the wrong thing, because they've believed in a sort of innocent way. They've believed what this person said. Yes. And I think I agree with you. Don't get me wrong, I'm not anti-science per se, it's just not me. But I do appreciate, if we go back to Porter's 5 forces, at least it's written down as something you can look at, and you can criticize it. Well, I used to, again, how many times have I used this phrase? I used to say to students when I taught Porter's 5 forces, we'd look at it, and the biggest critic of Porter's 5 forces was Porter. 2 years after he published it, he really took it apart and said, well, it's a bit vague, it doesn't really touch it, it's very depends-y kind of thing. So, but at least it got something written down to actually
very good.
To analyze, critique, and whatever. Yeah, and that's where the science can bring to us. Yeah.
That was the critique that I was making about Seth Godin, where it can become so vague that you don't even know what the actual claim is. And you know, if I don't understand your proposition, then how can I falsify it? Because it's you know, it like marketing is storytelling, and you know, then it becomes any way I try and attack it, you know, it's like, oh no, that's not what I meant, and it's like you're too slippery. It's like you covered yourself in baby oil, and you're too slippery.
my digital books are here. I've got Seth Godin's is on here somewhere, and when I first read it, because it's quite old, his original book now, it was almost like reading a novel.
Which one? Permission marketing.
His first one. It'll be on here somewhere. But when I read it, I liked it, but almost as entertainment.
I agree. I agree. Yeah, it's more not a textbook. No. Yeah, exactly. His work are more pleasure books, but I like. I'm actually more of a fan of his older work. He has done some great stuff with who's the guy who made guerrilla marketing famous? Jay Levinson, I believe.
Yeah, got
you. Something like that. Yeah. he wrote a book with him, Guerrilla Marketing for the Home-Based Business, which I thought was astounding. I don't know anyone who's read it. It's 1984 or something.
Really?
It's not popular at all. I just stumbled upon it because Audible recommended it to me. It's a great book because they cover stuff like positioning before positioning was really like a thing and became more known, because positioning came and then it went away, and now it's big again. But a lot of good stuff was in that, and also all marketers are liars, which I think is a good book that he wrote as well. And that emphasizes the way you frame stuff, and how you can influence buyer behavior through perception and framing. But like his latest book, This Is Marketing, it was so confusing. I read it twice because I saw good reviews, and I was like, maybe I just wasn't really paying attention. Sometimes you're daydreaming, and so I read it again, and I got nothing out of it. It's so confusing. But you made the point of this disconnect sometimes between marketing, academia, and practitioners. And I don't know if you know Professor Nassim Taleb, but he has written a few books, Anti-Fragile, I believe, and The Black Swan, and a few of these books. But he's a professor in risk. He spends a lot of time thinking about risk, and he has this heuristic which he calls lecturing the birds on how to fly. So it's exactly what you said. You have the practitioner, and then the academic is telling the practitioner, no, wait, here's what you're doing. So that's how you can sometimes get into
I don't think I've read that book. I must have read something about it. But does he not use the argument that theoretically a bird would never get off the ground?
Oh,
if you looked at it purely as the weight, mass versus this, that, and the other, or is it or bees definitely would never get off the ground. If you looked at the theory of wingspan and lift as opposed to mass and this, that, and the other, a bee would never ever get off the ground.
Yeah, you saw this actually with the Wright brothers, right? With the Wright brothers, where experts were certain that flight wouldn't happen, like even a day before they actually figured it out. So yeah,
actually, you've hit on another one there. If I was still teaching, I'd be using your examples all the time. The first flight, in fact, if we talk about still flight now, although computerized, but if we go back to early flight, there was the, if you like, academic theory of if we do this will happen, and I'm not an expert, but it's all about wind flow over the wing, isn't it, that gives lift or whatever, that there's this theory, which probably goes back 100 years or more before that this can happen. But then you've got the practitioner, Wright brothers, if you like, who start nailing wood together and building these things up. They turn around and go, well, actually, we've done that, but, it didn't work. Then the theorist goes, perhaps that's because we got this maths wrong. What did you say about where you put the engine? Was the engine forward of the thing? Well, why don't you move it back 2 inches? Because we think so. You've got that combination of the man with the hammer and the wood putting this thing together and risking his life trying to get off the ground on it, and the theorist who is accepting the criticism to say this does or doesn't work, and then going back to the drawing board and saying, well, perhaps I got that wrong, or perhaps if we did this or if we did that, try that. And then they tried that. No, it didn't get off the ground either. And between the two of them, we've now got jet fighters and jet planes kind of thing. It is that mix of that. I don't think we do that in business. I'm going to say we don't do that in business enough, because it's relatively easy to get too good. Well, is it? I think you've got to have practitioners who are willing to accept theory, and theorists who are willing to accept practice. And there are exceptions to the rule. A lot of the people that you've spoken about that have written books will sort of meet somewhere in the middle and accept arguments from both sides. And because you've got this one side of the old how do you know that'll work? Oh, it's a gut thing. Well, actually, I argue some way that experience. You were saying I often did it with. I tried to when I was teaching. I remember once a cafe opened on the main road going to the university, and it opened. It was just in the wrong place. No footfall, nowhere to park near it. And I said to the students, have you seen the new cafes opened on there as you come? Yeah, most of them had a bus and everything. I said, what we're in now, we're in October of the first term. I said that'll be closed by summer, and they all went, oh. And RJ, I was sad to say it, because some poor bugger had invested perhaps their life savings in opening this cafe, and it was never going to succeed. I felt like going in and saying, I hope you've not put your life savings into this.
This is the football coach. This is the football coaching.
Yeah, purely my experience of saying,
exactly.
From my experience of choosing shops or choosing buildings to open as a shop, I looked at it and went, you can't park, there's no footfall. There was no footfall, by the way, because there was a zebra crossing 10 yards before it, where most of the footfall was walking towards the cafe, but turned off on the zebra crossing because all the other shops were on the other side of the road. If it had been 20 yards this way before the zebra crossing, might have made a success of it, but it was 10 yards in the wrong place. I don't know if there is a scientific equation that says works out on 10 yards in the wrong place. It was my experience that said that, and the students were delighted. They came back the next term, the next year, next academic year in October. Oh, you were right, Alan, that cafe's closed. And they were like, oh, you were right. And I'm going, that's nothing to be happy about. That's someone who obviously didn't have the experience, has never worked in it, never run business, and they thought it could be successful. And what I tried to do through sort of business clubs and things is digitally based mainly, but I'm still saying that's marketing. What I used to do is say to them, and the university used to do mentoring as well. I would say, put my name down, and I'll just have half an hour with them. Tell them to come with me with their idea for the business. And some of them, like that person, if they'd come to me and I looked at it and gone, I'm sorry, it's in the wrong place. And what I want you to do is for the next 2 days, I want you to go and stand outside that building opposite and watch where the people go. And they would have come back and said, "You're right."
Right. Exactly.
It's getting
that's very old school, by the way. What you're talking about right now, it's very old school, and we've kind of lost that, unfortunately. But you know, just putting your shoes on, you know, putting your pants on, and getting your behind outside of the building, and actually going to a location, checking out. People don't really teach that anymore, and you are right. That's a form of risk reduction and risk mitigation that is very smart versus investing, and then you have some cost bias where you have in for a penny, in for a pound. It's like, okay, now this has to work, so you keep pouring money into it, and you find yourself really in a pickle. You should really check out some of Professor Nassim Taleb's work. He also has a book.
Can you message me some of these?
I will.
Yeah,
I will. He has this this concept which is called skin in the game, and the idea of skin in the game. He gives this example: why are there no bad airplane pilots? And the reason is because if you are bad, you leave the pilot's gene pool. You leave the set of pilots because you crash the plane, and that's that.
Yeah.
But in academia, oftentimes you can survive by bullshitting because you are not judged by reality; you are judged by peers. And now you're again opening the window to nonsense, essentially, because there's no good forcing mechanism for truth in the way that oftentimes there is for the founder. The example that you just gave, where the poor guy goes out of business. There is an argument to be made that the world is very complex, and you're dealing with something which is called a complex adaptive system, the technical term, but like it hints to this notion that you can't easily replicate systems because there are so many variables and they're constantly changing and you don't know how to interact. So it's possible that if you run the experiment again, you get a different result. Not just possible, but likely. So that makes it a little bit tricky to draw conclusions from failure. However, I agree with you. So a guy like that, he fails, and keeping the complex argument in mind, you can see if you can learn something from that. But it's unfortunate that you have to do it that way. But there is this real world pressure that acts as a forcing function to get it right, which is something that in academia you oftentimes don't have.
Yeah, but you don't get punished in academia.
Exactly.
Particularly in America, if you've got tenure, then you've got to shoot somebody, haven't you, to get sacked in that. It is you can publish whatever you like, so long as it's published. There's no comeback on you to say, oh, this is wrong or whatever. Whereas you open a shop and it fails. Although, again, there's another argument, I think, if you look at America, which I think is different to the UK, is perhaps I'm pretty certain it was a guy that opened this particular cafe. Perhaps he's gone on to open another cafe because he learnt and thought, right, the customers loved it. I never had any food, this and the other. I was in the wrong place. So I'm going to go out and get a bank loan, and I'm going to open the same cafe, but in a better position, which I think is the American way kind of thing. That, failure, you look at, oh, why did I fail? Let's move on. I'm going to do exactly this. All the things that were successful, I'm going to repeat, but it needs to be somewhere where there's people walking past. And then perhaps he is now a millionaire. I don't know. But, it would have been a lot. I tried to get it across. I really did feel sorry for the guy, because I got the impression that maybe he took redundancy from a company or something. This, I'd always love to run my own cafe. And so along comes the business of whatever is, he's an administrator for something, do you want to take the redundancy? You'll get £50,000. Well, I always wanted to open a cafe. And so effectively their life savings goes into this thing. And I'm not trying to sound clever, but it was never going to succeed. It wasn't niche enough that people would say, oh, I've got to park in the car park 50 yards away and walk to it. But if somehow it had got the niche of whatever it is, perhaps if it had been vegetarian, although vegetarian, my second wife was vegetarian. I've been used to walking around cities of the world, trying to find restaurants that don't sell all meat stuff. And we would walk for miles because we'd know, or if it had something about it. But it was a cafe. It was a very nice cafe. It was a reasonably priced cafe, because I've seen his board in the window. He ticked nearly all of the marketing boxes, but he didn't tick place properly, and that cost him the business. So they do, and it saddens me that
this is where you do start to wonder. I'll have to wrap up because I have to give a lecture soon. But this is where you do start to wonder.
Put it on this, and I'll do your lecture.
I'm going to take you up on that. I'm serious. I'm going to invite you to one of the YRC deep classes. Right.
Go on, you better finish up.
This is where you start wondering if they could have saved it with a proper differentiation, and the technical version of differentiation is always meaningful by definition. So it needs to be a meaningful differentiation to the consumer. So you start wondering, maybe what if they said, okay, we're in trouble because there's no foot traffic or footfall, as you said. So now what do we do? Okay, what if we throw out all of the food mainly, and we focus heavily on coffee with a few nice pastries, and we're gonna go hard on that, and maybe that's enough to overcome that resistance of people crossing the road.
Or if we ignore the last 2 years, which has thrown retail all to pieces, but you've got me thinking now, if that cafe had have done a fast service collect windowy thing, that the people walking along, I'll walk 10 yards and because I know I'll get served very quickly kind of thing. Something like that.
Brilliant.
It's 10 yards, but if it's that now, if they're asking me now, I would say get the dreaded app, but can you make it so that people can order the coffee while they're getting out of their car in the car park, so that when they walk up to your window, it's stood there with their name on. So they just walk up, basically go, thanks,
that's good.
Walk off. Now,
that's good.
That's when, but unfortunately, if I'm thinking of that, so is every other bugger in the world. So you're going to have, that is no longer a differentiator, is it? Because there are so many cafes that do that kind of thing. Yeah.
True. That's true. But you're always surprised at how badly people implement the basics. So you oftentimes you're surprised. You think, customer service isn't competitive advantage because everyone has good customer service, and then you look around and you realize, it's a cost center instead of a profit center.
Before you finish, I'm going to go right back to where we started with the 4 Ps. The 4 Ps is really, really simple. It is. The guy at the bar knows the 4 Ps, don't they? You know, what's the 4 Ps? And the guy at the bar will say, I know what it is. Yep. It's not the concept which is difficult. It's getting the 4 Ps right.
Right. Yeah.
That is really, really, really hard. Getting the 4 Ps right. It's not just down saying, oh, you need the right product. It's what is the right product? What is the right place? What is the right promotion? What is the right price? And by the way, far, far too many small businesses think the price has got to be low.
Oh my God. Yes.
No.
Exactly. We during YRC Deep is like an MMA gym membership,
Right.
but you go to an MMA school if you want to learn MMA gym, if you want to learn how to fight, because they cover all of the different fields. They cover boxing, they cover kicking, Muay Thai, they cover ground fighting, and you practice. So you train. So it's not just like they explain stuff and then you sit behind a desk and then you go home. No, you practice. So it's that combination, stuff that's true, evidence-based, plus practice. And that's YRC Deep. It's an ongoing membership for entrepreneurs and for marketers.
Right.
And then YRC is a 12-week boot camp where it's like, okay, how is your business doing right now? And we're going to try and blow it up in a period of 12 weeks. Very focused, very serious, no dilettante, no nonsense, serious stuff.
I assume people pay you for that.
Yeah, of course.
It's a business.
Yes.
Not part of the university or something. It's a business thing.
Exactly. It's for profit. I'm essentially trying to build how I believe entrepreneurial education should be taught, because I don't like the way it's being taught in universities for 2 reasons, essentially. The academic problem, which you alluded to, where it's like you're doing research for the sake of research versus actually real world application and stuff like that. And secondly, the lack of implementation. You can't teach swimming from a university. You have to get in a swimming pool. You have to do it. And there's pretty much always a lack of implementation. Even if you get the right content from YouTube or Udemy or choose your platform, it's still oftentimes way too low on implementation. And we at YRC and YRC Deep go extremely heavy on implementation. So I have a background in behavior design under BJ Fogg, so I have a lot of experience when it comes to how behavior science.
He was in my first ever book.
Nice.
Yeah, what was Fogg's big it was something to do with usability or something?
Where he started, you mean?
It's when I first got into, in the mid-90s, when I got into
in the mid-90s, he was still doing research on the interaction between human behaviors and computer systems.
That's it. Yeah, it's as the books have sort of grown out of it, but yeah, is HCI, is that his stuff? Human computer interface? Was that
I'm blanking on the acronym because I haven't looked at that research for a long period of time, but there was a technical term, yes.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Go on.
No, it's all good. It's all good. But because I have that background in behavior science, my classes are structured in a very specific way because I use behavior science to iterate. So one of the things we did wrong in the first cohort of YRC is all of the homework was outside of the classes. And then I quickly learned that no one does the homework because life, So what we now do is we always have an upper bound on the classes of 2 hours, which is another behavior design thing that I learned, because otherwise people show up late or they leave early and it's like a beginning and an ending, and then you can put it in your calendar, and it makes it easier for your planning and your personal life as well to schedule around that. But now the half of the class is a lecture and half of the class is implementation of the stuff that we have covered. And then every Sunday, also again, like once a week, we have a behavior design session, which is what are your goals for the month? We set those at the beginning of the month. And then each week we break them up into what you want to achieve during the week. And then we make a behavior design in order to achieve that. And then the Sunday is the feedback session in order to double check if everything is on track. And if not, then we use that as inspiration to make a new behavior design. So if you keep forgetting to do the behavior of doing outreach, You have decided you want 10 new clients. You came to the conclusion you want to do 50 outreaches a day, cold emails sending to company.
Yeah.
On Sunday, we learned that you haven't done one, and the reason why wasn't because you're scared, but you kept forgetting. Now we know the anchor is a problem, and then it's like, okay, you wanted to send those at night, but your wife, your kids, you forgot. What if we move that to before you start working? And that's the first thing that you do. So, you know, a very heavy emphasis on implementation and application.
I think I would call what you're doing coaching.
Coaching, okay, yeah.
When you're coaching in sport, you talked about it with the boxing things. When you're coaching swimming, you've got to be there and you tell the people what to do, and then you watch them or you might show them in the pool what to do. Then you put the people in the pool and you watch them, and when they get out, you say, well, this is what you're doing right or wrong. Yeah, I see that with that there's a difference between coaching and teaching.
Yeah,
you can do it without practice.
You are 100% right. The only problem is if you are an MMA coach, that has a good connotation because there are a lot of great MMA coaches. But if you hear the word business coach, you immediately think of like the same problem when it comes to people who do what's it called? What Tony Robbins does? Life coaching.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
I believe it's life coach or something. You immediately think of some unemployed, never went to school idiot who doesn't know what he's talking. And that's when I hear business coach. So I think business coach has the wrong connotation entirely.
I think you're right. And I would never call myself a coach. But if we go back to before business, and I think it's the last 20 years that business has really snaffled the term coach. Before, coach was sport related.
That's true.
Yeah. Which is, you know, and it's funny, it became popular about 20 years ago, and Sunderland University started running coaching courses, how to be a coach, right? And I just said, it's shite. You're just teaching management here, but you've given it, but full marks, you know, they cottoned onto the coach thing. Oh, everybody's looking for coaches now, this, that, and the other. I got a Football Association, UK Football Association coaching badge when I was 17. And that's how I'm qualified football coach, if you like. And I was saying 20 years ago, and I was saying to them, well, I've already got a coaching. Oh, you've already got a coaching qualification. I said, yeah. I said, somewhere at home, I've got a tracksuit with the badge on. Well, what do you mean? I said, I'm a qualified FA coach. And they went, oh, that's not what we're talking about. That's not. And I said, well, hold on, name a bigger association than the UK Football Association. I am qualified to teach people how to play football. How is your business coaching ever? Oh, it's very different. And so I went along to a couple of their classes and sat in, and I said, oh, you've just done the equivalent of teaching a 10-year-old how to kick a ball. Well, what do you mean? Well, you tell them how to hold the leg, and you show them how the leg moves, and you show them how the move, and you show them how the ankle moves, and then you say, you do that round thing there, kick it over there. And when they try to kick it, you say, no, you've missed the ball because you need this, your other foot stood near it. You've just done that it was a human resources recruitment-based thing. I said, that's all you've done. You've told them what to do, and then it was interviewing. You've told them how to do an interview, told them to do an interview, and then you've critiqued it at the end. Where's the newfangled thing in that? It's been around forever. But
I think this is
money from newfangled ideas, which aren't newfangled. I think you should really go and do some teaching.
I think this is a good place to wrap it up. I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation.
I've enjoyed it too as well, mate.
I think people will get a lot out of this. This has been super productive. I'm gonna add some stuff in the description. This is gonna be on YouTube, a few other places as well. But I'm gonna put some stuff in this description. Is there anything that you want people that we can send people to? You've written a few books as well.
My website covers everything.
Okay.
I still use it as because it was associated with the books. It's always been my sort of mouthpiece, if you like. There's a section on it which I can't even remember what it's called. 2 seconds while I open my own website.
What's the URL?
AlanCharlesworth.com.
All right, there we go.
And you don't want to know why I had to buy AlanCharlesworth.com when I could have bought it for about $5 when I was selling domain names to everyone else. I have a section on my website called Musings and Rants. And basically it's me just going, influencers. So that's me. But yeah, everything's on there.
Okay, perfect. Then I'll be sure to include that, and people can check it out. AlanCharlesworth.com.
Yeah, just my name.com.
Wonderful. All right. Thank you so much for your time. I have enjoyed
You're most welcome.
way too much.
I have thoroughly enjoyed it.
Perfect. All right.
Okay.
We'll continue chatting on Twitter. Take care.
Okay, and all the best to you. Cheers now.
Bye-bye.